Hey guys, I want to welcome you to this special edition of Halftime Chat. I'm going to introduce two amazing legends and guests from um, Uptown Records, Motown, so many stuff. So I'm going to bring in both Jimmy Luv Jenkins and Eddie F. And yeah, we're going to have an amazing time. So I'm bringing in both of them right now and uh, yes, I want to welcome both of you guys in. How are you both doing?
Good, good, good. Uptown, Motown,
Okay,
and beyond.
yeah, after Motown and beyond. But yes, people are going to start coming in, and as they do, um, yeah. I mean, Jimmy, it'd be great just to be able to introduce you because I know a lot of people had seen the interview we did when you were kind of chronicled the journey of Uptown. But can you give everyone just a brief introduction as to who you are and the role you played at Uptown?
Okay. My name is James Jimmy Love. That's spelled Luv Jenkins. And I started Uptown with Andre Harrell. Well, he brought me on to Uptown because he started Uptown. He's the founder. And I knew him since I was like 8 or 9 years old. And since the beginning of the time, he always had this vision about being a music mogul, a television producer, and a creator of the arts from the beginning. Um, Even in elementary school, to intermediate school, where we started giving parties with Africa Bambaataa at 127, and also DJ Mario, who were like two legends at the time. Disco King Mario, two legends at the time. That was Andre's favorite DJ when we were younger. And so he always had a
Okay.
vision, of blending music, film, and fashion together and creating a company. And I lived in the Northeast Bronx. That's considered uptown to, the Bronx, the real uptown. Now, Harlem is also
Yeah.
uptown as well. So he used to come up to my high school, and my high school had, you know, MCs there like Raheem from Grandmaster Flash, Smooth B from Nice and Smooth. We had a bunch of stars at my high school. Lisa and the Colt Jams, guitar player went there. His sister is a lawyer in the
Okay.
entertainment business at Instagram, excuse me. She was there. It just was a melting pot. Grand Mixer DST was there. He won the first Grammy in hip hop with Herbie Hancock, and he was a very famous DJ in the Bronx, as well as Mount Vernon, as well as, downtown where he did the Roxy, and he met Robert De Niro, Herbie Hancock, and all these downtown folks at the time. So he was pretty popular. Also, where I come
Yeah.
from, Christopher Williams went to my high school as well, and a bunch of just artists was there. And
Okay.
Andre used to come because he went to Charles Evan Hughes. He used to come to my high school, and he'd be like, "Yo, this shit is fly. Y'all got 25 major gyms, 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools, a football stadium, a baseball stadium. We had everything, a planetarium, a New York Public Library, and besides that, we had all the pretty girls there too, as well. And
but yeah, I mean, and we're going to get into more because people are joining in. But um, Eddie, do you want to introduce yourself as well? Because as I said, people might know you from one group and others might know you from others. But how would you want to introduce yourself as well?
Well, I just say Eddie F, aka DJ Eddie F. Started with Heavy D and the Boys. Um, Went to Mount Vernon High School, originally from Mount Vernon. And since Jimmy went through his school, I'm just gonna, you know, just drop a couple of bombs real quick. Went to Mount Vernon High School where Dick Clark, Denzel Washington, Stephanie Mills,
Right.
Wow.
And then and then my Gus Ray Williams. At one point, we were the only high school in the nation with 4 players in the NBA at the same time.
Wow.
Remember that because we had posters. They had posters in the school that said Mount Vernon High School, the only high school in the nation with 4 players in the NBA. And we famous for basketball. We win the state championship probably at least half of the time, probably more than half of the time. Mount Vernon High School are state champions. Shout out Mount Vernon. Shout out my classmate from kindergarten all the way to Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, who's mayor of Mount Vernon. Shout out to Mount Vernon. But
the home of the haircuts too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, well, shout out Groovy Styles, the original
Mike Daddy,
leader of the 7 Up crew. Mike Daddy, fresh cuts. Scotty G, who will keep the fresh cuts. Man, it's a lot of barbers, man. I can't even name all the barbers. But Mount Vernon is the D-Mac home. Is the home of the fresh cuts. My man Ray. But anyway, Mount
Daddy
Vernon. From Mount Vernon, New York, and within my generation or graduating class, and the last couple of years after me was myself, Heavy D, Albie Shore, Pete Rocket, CL Smooth, Kenny Smooth, Kate, Dave Hall, Novell Hodge. We all
Wow.
Vernon. And I know I left somebody out. Eric Miltier, great writer who wrote the original Mary J. Blige first single. Jeff Redd, You Called and Told Me. Jeff Redd went to Mount Vernon High School. I'm glad I mentioned him.
What?
He's my man Jeff Redd, who I call a everlasting Harlem Mount Vernon.
You Called and Told Me, man.
Yeah, Jeff. I love our brother Jeff because not only is his music fly, his style and fashion is always fly. He always represents New York and beyond, and Mount Vernon. Very, very stylish. So I appreciate our brother. And I mentioned Al already. Everybody knows Al's my brother. Started off with.
Yeah.
But come from Mount Vernon, New York. And then I also not only being an artist on Uptown, I started Untouchables. We produced a lot of records for Uptown. And then I went on to do remixes and production outside of Uptown for LaFace Records, Motown Records. Then I went on to be vice president of A&R at LaFace Records with L.A. Reid and Babyface. I was honored to work with them. And then I also brought Donnell Jones to LaFace. And I'll just stop there because I'm sure we're going to...
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to know because we've got Jimmy here. I mean, how did you meet up with Jimmy and the whole Uptown? Because it's I've heard from Jimmy's side about how he's how they started stuff, but how did you guys get to the attention of Uptown and Jimmy?
Well, before I even go into how we got to Uptown, I'm just going to talk about Jimmy really quick. Jimmy is so. If Andre Harrell is the general or the leader of Uptown, Jimmy is the next man, and not only that, he embodied the whole spirit, the whole vocabulary, the slang. Everybody that you heard at Uptown talking that had a certain dialect, a certain way of speaking, a certain vocabulary, that all came from Jimmy Luv. Jimmy Luv invented the whole Uptown. Basically, persona. Like we heard people saying, whatever, and all. I'll be sure putting that into videos or whatever.
Wow.
Jimmy was definitely somebody who people like. He had a whole company talking like him, using his vocabulary, and that became like the whole phrasing that we use at Uptown Records. Now, how we got to Uptown was we did demos in my basement. It was myself, Heavy, Al, and Novell. And I'm not going to go through the whole story right now, but long story short, we went to try and meet Russell Simmons, and we ended up meeting Andre Harrell. He was vice president of marketing at Rush at the time. And then Andre actually, we didn't know he was getting ready to start his own label. which was Uptown Records, and he asked us to be a part of that, and that's how we ended up signing with Uptown Records.
I mean, Jimmy, at that time, were you there when had you were already there at the
Yeah.
ground when Heavy D and Eddie
Since the OnStar
joined in?
Yes, I knew Heavy and Eddie and the group since they were like 16, 17 years old.
Wow.
Eddie is like a prodigy and a genius. Instead of taking his scholarship to MIT, he came on the road with us and became the DJ Eddie F that he is today. And also, he had everything already set up. As he put me in check today, he was letting me know that he already had his music done and prepared before he even got on the scene.
I mean, Jimmy, hold on, because guys might not realize this. Because I remember when I interviewed G Wiz, Glenn, he said that they all dropped out of high school, but Eddie finished because Eddie's parents, mom, were educators, and he was smart.
Like, Eddie finished early too, like 2 grades ahead of time.
Yeah. I was a grade ahead. I got skipped. And my mother and father were both in education, and my dad absolutely wasn't going for, they were from the South. They were both from Mississippi, moved to New York, progressive Black, Southerners, education was everything. In our house we had on the wall, we had JFK, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King, like 3 pictures on the wall. So we had that.
Wow.
It was one of those houses. But I was telling Jimmy today that I wasn't a producer when I came into Uptown, but I was a beat maker. I was trying to figure out how to make beats. And why he was saying this is because we were discussing that the first 2 records that ever came out on Uptown, which were Mr. Big Stuff and Uptown's Kicking It, I did the drum beats for those songs, and I was a co-producer. I wasn't a producer, so I don't want to get anything wrong or take any credit.
Controversy.
I wasn't a producer. I didn't even know what a producer did. But my point when I was explaining to Jimmy was, of the whole album, those were the only drum beats that I did. I did those drum tracks, and I was co-producer, and it just so happened those songs ended up being the first 2 singles off the Uptown's Kicking It compilation, which were the first 2 singles ever off of Uptown's Kicking It, and Mr. Big Stuff. So for my contribution as a beat maker and co-producer, and to have my name on both of those songs in the credits, I'm very proud of that, because those were the first 2 bricks laid in the building of Uptown musically. So I'm proud of that I can say, hey, I co-produced and did the drum tracks of the first 2 songs that ever came out on Uptown.
But Jimmy, your job was to make sure the radio got to hear that. I mean, what did you do to make sure that those tracks really, hit the airwaves?
Before I go any further, I just want to make sure we give a shout out to Harlem, because without Harlem, that's what our whole persona was designed after. All right. Yeah. So when you see that cat, that's a Harlem cat. The flavor, the beeper, the gold chain, and is really an educated cat too as well. So when I first met Eddie and these guys, they made these records. They made the compilation album. Uptown is Kicking It album. So those 2 records came off of there first. Nobody knew who Heavy D and the Boyz were, and nobody knew who the Uptown crew were. So when I started, I had to go to the street, and I had already invented the street team. I already had a street team. Shout out to Chuck Bone, and we had a street team called the Gas Station, and the Gas Station worked for me and Andre while we were in college, giving out posters, flyers, and going radio, very limited to get a commercial going or whatever. So, I would always start out in the street. I would go to the clubs, the restaurants, the Rucker game. I had teams at the Rucker. We went to the rooftop. I took Heavy D and the boys there the first time they performed at the rooftop, you know, and that was a sight to see because they were always prepared. Like many groups would distinguish them from every other group was that their presentation was clean cut, fly, Mount Vernon / Harlem. Me and Andre gave them the Harlem, but they already had the haircuts, the styling. Shout out to G Wiz, who definitely did all of that. He did all the choreography. Him and Troy, they came up with it. They didn't have anybody coming in and doing that for him. He dressed heavy, he dressed Eddie and everything. And the set design as well. Eddie was the first person to have a whole presentation on stage. You know what I mean? Even in a little club. Like he had you know, outboard gear. He had the drum machine. He had the lights. He had the whole show presentation set up already. And then they coordinated with the choreography and the style and the flavor. And that was the set off of Uptown Records. You know what I mean? Now, where we get this education from in music, it begins with Andre Harrell and Teddy Riley. Andre giving Teddy the vision of what it would look like, sound like, what the women would look like, what the men's haircut would look like, the shoes, the pants, everything. How they would even facial gestures. We sat down every day, every night when we go to work for 16 hours. The other 8 hours was designing the set, the scene, from the office to the club. And we went to the club every single night to promote records, 4 and 5 clubs a night. And sometimes we'd come from DC to New York, back to Philly. So, you know, and that was like a run. We created and hired the people that originally started doing the Howard Homecoming. Shout out to Mark Barnes, who was doing the Howard Homecoming parties. And at those parties, we started bringing Uptown acts to those parties. As a result of that, now you look around, you see in, you know, the girls from Uptown, you see in Jodeci, Heavy D, Al B. Shore when he was at his height, Bobby Brown, New Edition. We came into the door where MCA was a traditional company that promoted records traditionally. I broke the mold. I went any fucking way I wanted to go, and I promoted the records any kind of way I wanted to promote them. And I went to, you know, at that time, they didn't want black music and black executives going to pop radio or going to pop press. I went to pop press, I went to pop radio stations and promoted my records. Now, the way not that they put them on automatically, they didn't put them on automatically at black radio. But what I did was build up a groundswell in the street so hard and heavy, you know what I mean, that they had to put them on. They had to come to me to ask me to put my records on because that's how heavy the groundswell was on the street. And then we had doing promotions with our artists and having them perform everywhere, as many places as we can, that we would pay for it, for that to happen, not a promoter. We would make sure we paid for them at first on a promotional run and everything like that. And then when MCA kicked in and took us from just a production deal to a distribution deal, more money came in for promotion, and then we became a bigger presence at radio.
You know, the first two singles we always talk about is Uptown's Kicking It and Mr. Big Stuff. Why do you think Mr. Big Stuff actually, you know, broke through and became the hit that it did? Especially, you know, Heavy D and the Boys were, you know, they were younger than Run DMC. They were quite different. So you couldn't compare them with anyone else. What do you think? Was it the production, or do you think it was the way Heavy sounded, or what did you think made that record?
Well, it was a combination.
The breakthrough.
It was
record.
A combination. It was the production. It was very, you know, clean, commercialized to a certain degree. You know, it wasn't underground, dirty. It was formatted for radio, and that's because of the people that was involved with it, like Eddie Teddy and whoever, Marley or whoever else was involved with the production of those records, mixing them or whatever, right? Then it was the way they looked. They were clean cut, and the way they moved, their whole presentation, Eddie's production on stage, bringing all this major production on stage. This is like a production you would see an R&B group have, like Rick James or something like that. Or, you know, it was this is the first time in hip hop we seen this level of production on stage. And then the way Heavy looked, and Glenn and Troy, they were clean cut, they were dancing, you know what I mean? So you could basically call them almost happy, but they wasn't really that happy, you know, like happy rappers. and Heavy was big and dancing and clean cut. He dressed like a slim guy, but he's actually a big guy. And you know, his haircut was always perfect. See, like everybody else prior to that, even if you look at Big Daddy Kane, he was never, and there's no disrespect to him, never as clean as Heavy D and the Boys. So it wasn't just the rapping and Heavy's vocal ability or Eddie's production ability and presentation. It was a combination of things. And then, so I'm bringing it to the radio station, and the radio station is like, yo, this ain't Def Jam rap. This ain't, you know, this ain't Run DMC, or this ain't Public Enemy, or this is not that. We can't play that. And I was like, first of all, I don't even want to go into the time where they segue for the rap music. I want to go in regular rotation.
Right.
I want to force you in regular rotation. I'm not trying to get on rap-a-tat, none of that shit first. I want to get in regular rotation first and then come back. Now that part is me selling myself. And that's where I had to establish relationships with program directors all around the country and eventually all around the world. And so it was a slow process, but Heavy D and the Boys were the ones that broke through for us at first with our first major record, our first platinum album, you know, and it was because of a combination of things why that happened. Heavy was the first person to perform with Michael Jackson and do a video with him, and perform with Janet Jackson and do a video with her. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you guys were global. I mean, at the time I was in Nigeria, and Mr. Big Stuff and Don't You Know, that whole album was big international. So it wasn't just in the US.
I want to say one more thing. Eddie was the guy that Eddie did in Living Color, the production on Living Color. So that's what his role in that group and in Uptown Records in general, because he A&R'd basically everything that came out of there. And he was like the unofficial A&R, the president of A&R of Uptown Records. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Eddie, there's something that Jimmy said that, because he mentioned about Andre with the vision and Teddy with the sound. And I guess some of us, you know, we see that Teddy co-produced the debut album, but how was Teddy involved with, you know, when you joined in? I mean, what was your relationship with Teddy in those very early days at Uptown?
But a couple of things. Before I answer that, I just want to jump back really quick. The other thing too that I wanted to add really quick about Mr. Big Stuff, we didn't realize it at the time, but one of the genius of Andre Harrell was that also, if you look at the video had, we were in a club and we kind of snuck into the club and we were performing for an older audience who was saying, you know, they were resisting rap, but we had a familiar song. We had Mr. Big Stuff, which was an old song that was mixed now into new rap. And it also went along with the fact that Uptown MCA was partnered with MCA Records, which was a powerhouse in R&B. So one of the genius of Uptown, and I didn't realize this till years later when I look back. I said, man, because Andre was also a marketing major. One of the things he was doing, he was basically sneaking rap and making it compatible with R&B, and saying we're gonna not only make the song that fits that, we're gonna make the video, and then that's what later on people at Uptown will call making your movie, where your whole presentation went along with how you're trying to deliver and market and what audience you're trying to get to. So I'm saying that to say Mr. Big Stuff was a rap record, but it also was an R&B accessible with a familiar old sample that threw back to old R&B, and we were trying to get on R&B radio. So that's one of the things that helped us cut through and get through on stations where normally they wouldn't play rap. And then you had Jimmy, who was breaking down the whole science, and he was Andre's basically. They were like basically right hand men to each other. So he was like he would go and deliver the vision that they already came up with, and then now bring that to radio and explain to them, this is why this fits, this is why this makes sense for you to play it with your other R&B records, because it's not offensive, it's not cursing, it's using an R&B record. Because the first version of Mr. Big Stuff, it had a whole different snare in there, and it was abrasive, and it was the snare that was the same snare that was used in Art of Noise and some other songs. It was other hip hop songs. It was very loud and abrasive. It was like, and Andre actually made us change it to a more R&B snare. And I remember at the time, we were like, man, sound watered down, man. It's not, it's not hard. But that was the genius of Andre. He was listening and saying, I can't, this is going to be too abrasive. I can't get this on R&B radio because it sounds too harsh. You know what I mean? And we didn't understand at the time, but that was part of the whole vision. Now to flip to the other side of your question, working with Teddy, as I was saying earlier, when I first got in the game, I wasn't a producer. I was a beat maker and I was a DJ. I knew all the records. I had the information. I knew how to program beats. But I didn't know anything about what a producer did. And that's where Teddy and Andre came in, and also Marley Marl. So I tell people, blessed as I was, Andre Harrell introduced me to Teddy Riley and Marley Marl. So like, who better to get, an education from than two giants in the game? Marley was, he was the first guy on radio with Mr. Magic. He had the Juice Crew. He was innovating sampling. He put sampling in hip hop, put James Brown in hip hop, and I was able to work directly with him, watch him. Then you have Teddy Riley, who took hip hop and R&B, was the first to fuse them together, and which became New Jack Swing, and I got to basically work directly with him. And then we worked on a whole album together in the studio. Sometimes I had beats and he would take them and fully produce them and finish them. Sometimes it was coming up with ideas right there in the studio. And I got to watch that whole process, even if it was coming up with a song from scratch. Because a lot of times we just go to the studio and we might be making up a record right there. Like there was records like I'm Getting Paid or Rock the Bass that got made in the studio, put together from the drum beat to bass line to heavy writing the rhymes. So for me, that was a whole education as somebody aspiring to be a producer. And I got a front seat to basically see Teddy Riley's process. This is how you make a record from start to finish. And one thing I always like to say about, I tell Teddy all the time when I talk to him, I say, man, when people call and they're gonna do something on you, tell them to please call me, because everybody knows Teddy Riley makes hit records. They know he makes smash hits. They know he worked with Michael Jackson, My Prerogative, Just Got Paid. They know the hit records. But what they don't know about Teddy is that Teddy was so gracious and giving. He would just give people drum sounds. He would say, yo, I'm using this keyboard. You should get this keyboard. Where most people would hide their stuff. Most people put tape on there, the name
Right.
was, and would like hide their sounds. Teddy was the exact opposite. He'd be like, yo, you need some sounds? And it showed two things. One, it was a level of graciousness. And two, also a level of confidence that he didn't feel like, if I give you my whole drum kit and all my sounds and everything, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do with it. You're going to do something else with it, and we both going to make hit records, and it's going to be fine. Like, and I think that's the part that always gets missed, because Teddy did that for a lot of people. He gave to a lot of people Even when he was in Virginia, you know, he had the Neptunes and those guys up under him. He had a lot of people that he just gave information, and it, to me, it's not a mystery that all these people over time ended up being like leaders of making like up-tempo R&B party records. You know what I mean? And a lot of, you know, if you look at that tree, a lot of that comes from Teddy Riley. So shout out to him.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Stanley Brown mentioned the same thing.
Yep.
Just about being under, just Teddy opens the door, lets everyone see what was going on. Kyle West as well. Before we go on, Jimmy, Sydney said a shout out from Sydney.
That's my daughter. Yep.
That's your daughter.
Thank you.
Okay. She shout out to Sydney. She's phoned her dad and stuff. But you know, the success of Heavy D and the Boyz, the first album, did it take up? Did you guys expect it to, you know, do as well as it did? Especially, you know, as I said, you had Eddie and Teddy doing this stuff. Was it a surprise how well it was received?
You asking me?
I mean, both of you, because you know Eddie was in the group and Jimmy, you're promoting it.
It was an aggressive grind. That's basically what it was. Like, you know what I'm saying? From the beginning, when it was just being born, brand new, everybody was new. The group was new. Andre was new at being a president, and definitely me and Kurt Woodley was new at our jobs. You know what I mean? Kurt was an A&R, and he was new at that, and I was new at going on the road, but I wasn't new at hustling. And so I was able to, you know, push my way into retail stores, into record companies, into restaurants, into, you know, radio stations, become friends with the owner of the station, and then the general manager, and then the program director, and then the music director at that time. So, and I also had product to provide. You know what I mean? I had constant product with producers like Teddy Riley, Eddie F, and at that time, maybe Marley Marr and I'll Be Sure, and then Devontae Swings. I always had a product and an identifiable logo, which is important. That Uptown Cat was identified, and it was a logo that you would be, as soon as you see it, you didn't even have to hear the record after a while.
Right.
Once I established it at radio and wherever else I had to, television, magazines, all mediums. Once I established that cat, you didn't have to have an interview or anything. You wanted to do it because it was coming from Uptown.
Right. And it was a special, one thing I want to throw back to too, it was a very special time. And ironically, the partner company, MCA, was based in California. So that also helped us because when we started, we had our first single. We a lot of times would go on the road, and then we would go to California, and we might be on a promo tour or a tour with artists from the West Coast. So there was a time where we were out on the road, and everybody had one song. Heavy D and the Boyz had their first single. Salt and Pepper had their first single. Eazy-E and NWA had their first EP and their first single. Ice-T had a single, Too Short had a single, MC Hammer had a single. Like we would be on shows and all of us had one record. We all had one or maybe two records.
Right.
So it was a special time because everybody just had one or two songs. Then it started being added. You had EPMD, you had Kid and Play, you had, you know, and it would be more and more people that had a few songs. And so we were like the group of artists that all had a song. You know, Rush and Def Jam, they had their thing because they were all under the same house and they had everybody and they did their tour. But we were like everybody who's not on Def Jam and not we all had one song. But it was very special because you got to watch, you know, Too Short, Ice-T, MC Hammer, Kid and Play, Salt and Pepper. All of us go from Big Daddy Kane, go from Queen Latifah, you know, go from one record to a second single to a first album. So it was a very special time, and it was a lot of fun because we all would like just discovering ourselves musically.
And it felt like there was no beef. It felt like there was a family because, like I said, it felt like you guys were like a family. I mean, Jimmy, if you notice, the artists didn't seem to compete with each other. They felt as if we're supporting each other and stuff like that. How was it behind the scenes as an executive?
Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh, I forgot them. They had a first single. They had girls like we all just had. One. It was great.
Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince. A lot of people from Philadelphia was coming out at that time because you had a key person that was breaking rap records, and her name was Lady B. And Mimi and Butterball was the program director and the general manager of WDAS. And they were assisting in really breaking rap music around the country. Like she was a very popular DJ. Like in New York, you had Red Alert, Chuck Chill Out, Mr. Magic, and Fly High, was at BLS, and they had bought the Rap Attack from the independent radio station to WBLS, and that was WLIB, where the Awesome 2 took that over. But at that time, it was Mr. Magic Rap Attack, and you had to hear it. And the independent people that were just getting involved with rap, they had to go and work Mr. Magic and Fly Tie. Then Fly Tie gets the job at WBLS, but at the same time, they start Cold Chillin' Records. And they got MC Shan, Roxanne Shante, Big Daddy Kane, Biz Markie, and they have all these guys, and they just started knocking walls down. And so they were our brothers, and Russ was our brothers. Russell Simmons used to hang out with our whole staff, you know what I mean? And be on me about being able to deliver records and reading the R&R, because at that time I didn't know what the fuck the R&R was at that time. Well, I didn't know how to get a record charted on Billboard outside of just going to ask the person at the radio station to put my record on and report it. But I didn't really have a full understanding. That's how young I was at the time. These guys are 16, I'm 20 or 22.
Right.
So I'm fresh out of college and really is trying to figure my way in the record business, which I desperately wanted to be in the record business at the time. You know what I mean? And so after Heavy D and the Boys, Eddie introduces us to a guy who takes our company to the next level. Even till today, he's one of the few pop artists that we ever had, which is Al B. Shore, and he's from Money Owner in Mount Vernon, a quarterback from Money Owner in Mount Vernon.
Right.
And that's the whole trend off of Platinum Plus Records. We were going platinum already, but I think your first album went gold or something, right?
Yep, it went gold. The first album,
and then the second one went platinum, and ever since then, Platinum Plus. Al came out of the box.
Sure. Yeah. Once we had that Al B. Shore power turbo boost on Uptown,
right?
Thing after that taking off.
So we had him at Warner Brothers, and we were working on the Guy album at the same time.
Yep.
Teddy was instrumental in both albums, and I was instrumental.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it'd be great to talk to you about how you balance Guy, but before that, because you mentioned Al B. Shore, and we've had Kyle West on the show. Mm-hmm. I love Kyle. He was the most humble. You'd forget that he was an industry man. He's he's like a school teacher. He's very nice, very well mannered. I love Kyle West. So, but Eddie, how did the whole Al B. Shore Kyle West combo come to your attention? And then you bring them to Uptown. How did that whole story go?
So me and Al. So I started DJing. And I did a house party with a friend that ended up blowing up really big, and then from there, I guess everybody who was at the house party, and then I started getting booked for parties. Next thing you know, I was doing the high school, I was DJing at the skating rink, I was doing all the parties. But I met Al in school, in high school, and then Al, we both like music, and he was cool, and he would come, with me to the parties and stuff like that. And then he actually he actually started, you know, I had moved to the basement and put my DJ equipment in the basement, and kind of that thing where you move, you know, you think you're a teenager now, you got your own apartment kind of. Al actually, he stayed in New Rochelle, so it was easier. He started crashing at my place, so he stayed with me. He ended up, you know, crashing in the basement because I had the whole basement and stuff like that. So we were like every day, like hanging out. He would come with me to the party, stuff like that. And the thing is, I had all the records, and then I would get a drum machine from time to time. But Al had a 4-track, so Al actually had a 4-track cassette player. And then he's the one who introduced me to Neville Hodge, who was a keyboard player. He was like, man, Neville, he's a dope keyboard player. So it was actually before we even started working with Heavy, it was me, Neville, and Al first. And then Troy introduced me to Heavy. I knew who Heavy was because from Mount Vernon is small. You know who everybody, but I didn't hang out with Heavy every day. I didn't even know he was a rapper like that. It was just, I was doing a lot of parties, and so one day I was doing a party at the Boyz Club, and I was setting up for a wedding reception, and Troy comes in the side door with Heavy, and he says, "Man, this is my friend Hev. He's trying to make a record. This is Eddie. This is Eddie F." And then we met, and then we became, I knew him, but I didn't know him like that. We connected. We instantly hit it off. We started hanging out every day, and then Hev became another person that would come to the basement. So at that point, it was me, I'll Be Sure, Neville, and Heavy in the basement, and we would make demos. And I told a little bit about that earlier, how we went to meet Andre. We were trying to meet Russell Simmons, where we met Andre. But fast forward to how did I get Al to Uptown? So we got our deal with Uptown, and then Al was still making demos. And actually, he was a rapper before he was a singer. He rapped in the style of Slick Rick and Dana Dane. And so he would also sing, and he would sing his own hooks. And him and Kyle continued to do demos. And one day they came up with this demo, Off on Your Own. It was a really great demo. He played it for me. I think he played it for Heavy too. And I got it. And I think we were thinking about it. I think it was gonna be like maybe a rap record. I think it was singing. Al had the verses on and everything, but I think Heavy might have been thinking about, making it one of those songs where Al sings the hook and he raps. So I had to tape myself, and I thought it was great. And I said, man, to myself, I didn't tell anybody. I said, I ain't even tell Al. I said, man, I think Al could probably get his own deal off of this. I'm taking this to Andre. I just said it to myself. So I took it to Andre. I gave Andre the demo. He played it, and I remember there was some women there that he was with, and they were having lunch or this, and he played the tape. And he liked it. He said, man, oh, that's your man. He said, that's your man, light skin with the curlies. I was like, yeah, and he's like, okay. And the reason why I say that is because one of the women from the table ended up saying, oh, that's Eddie, that's your friend, the light skinned guy? Oh yeah, Andre, he's good. So it was kind of like co-signed. And then I ended up telling Al, I played the demo, Andre wants to meet with you. And the rest, as they say, is history. I don't know how everything went, but I'm assuming Andre took the tape, got it to Benny Medina. They gave it to Quincy Jones, entered it into the contest. Quincy was like, "Oh, I love this," and the Innovators. And next thing you know, Al was out of here. He was on the launch pad. He was just like, phew. And that was something that I just did because we were in the door and it was my friend. And I was like, okay, we're in the door. How can I help my other friend get in the door and get a deal? And then little did I know, and now, I realized this years later, 20, 30 years later, I'm helping my friend. And I actually confirmed this with Jimmy, like maybe 5 years ago. I said, man, I never thought about it. I was just doing this to help Al, but I inadvertently helped myself, helped us, helped the whole company, because when Al blew up, and Jimmy confirmed this for me, when Al blew up and got so hot on fire that Uptown actually was started even leveraging Al. Like, yo, if you want Al, be sure you're gonna have to play record, or you're gonna have to play this other record we got, because so it just, and I'm just saying that to say you just never know how karma's gonna work. Doing something good for somebody else, it ends up helping you. You end up helping yourself when you're just trying to help somebody else. And that was just the energy. I'm just happy to say that I have a whole group of friends that I went through high school with, that I graduated with or graduated behind me, that I could say I helped as many people as I could just get in the game, get in the business, whether they were producers, writers, artists, you know, because that's what it was about. That's actually how Untouchables got formed. It didn't get formed. I didn't sit down one day and say, I want to have a company, I want to have a record company. It actually was a fluke. It was I was trying to get Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Pete Rock and Novell signed with Uptown as producers. And I was calling Uptown every day, and they were calling me. What they say. And then I think a month or two after they were waiting to get signed as producers, one day Novell and Pete called me on a conference call and say, man, why don't you just manage it? And I had never thought about being a manager or anything. There was no Untouchables. There were, but I was a person who organized and helped people and had suggestions of how to get things done. So they asked me to do it, and then I said, okay, well, let's come up with a name, and then, you know, all right, let's figure out a structure and whatever. And then I asked one of our lawyers, hey, could you put together a management agreement? You know, I had no intentions of starting a company. That's how Untouchables got started. It got started because my friends asked me to manage them. And I said, let me put together a company to do it. And then one thing led to the next. They were the first two. And then Dave Hall would come around, and he asked me to help him. He was actually working on Brand Nubians. He already had a song on Brand Nubians, but he was trying to get his business straight. And I was like, okay, I'll help you. I had knew Dave because Dave was one of the guys that hung out with us when we had the DJ crew. He would come around with my man Gary Peterkin. We had the DJ crew, and he was one of the guys with us. So I knew him, but I didn't know him as a producer. I just knew him as a cool guy who would hang out at parties. Ended up helping him with his situation, getting his business straight with Brand Nubians and the song with Grand Poobah, and then he joined the Untouchables, and then Kenny Smooth, who was always a cool guy in the neighborhood, he would come around, and and as Kenny says today, he was like, "Yo, I'm not getting left out. I need to be down with the Untouchables, yo." And I ended up signing him, and that's how Untouchables got put together. It was like friends saying, "Yo, manage me, put me down," and then that's how the whole thing happened. And then we became kind of like an engine for Uptown. We would it's like, what's the assignment? Like, what needs to get done? Who needs records? Who needs to get help? Who needs to get fixed? What needs to get remixed? And a lot of times it would be just based on the direction of Andre or Kurt Woodley or whoever the creative person was in charge. We need this. We need an up-tempo. We need something that sounds like this, And again, like Jimmy was saying, Harlem, Uptown was the point of view. So it would be like, that's why you have songs like, for example, the New Jack Swing version of I Found Lovin' for Jeff Redd, because I Found Lovin', the original I Found Lovin' was like, it was a Harlem Uptown,
right,
dance two-step classic, you know what I mean? So that we were making records that was like, okay, we're gonna make the new R&B hip-hop version of the Harlem sensibility R&B classic. Same thing with Guy and with Teddy. When it's a funny thing, a lot of Bruno Mars makes a lot of songs and attributes a lot of his success to the R&B pioneers that came before him, and he was in a band. And they used to do covers of the R&B classics of, say, like the 90s and the 2000s. Teddy Riley was doing that in the 80s. He had a band in Sylvia's Restaurant, and they would do the Uptown, not Uptown Records, Uptown Harlem classics of what was hot in Harlem in, say, like the 70s, 80s, and they would do all those songs. But he was also a drummer, so he would put a fly beat to it. And I wasn't there, but from one of the stories I hear is that one of the times that Andre they went to eat at Sylvia's, and they saw Teddy's band, and you know, it was one of the from what I hear, it was one of the most awesome things that Andre had ever seen, because they were about to perform a record and somebody requested a song in the audience. And then whoever was the band leader looked at Teddy and was like, all right, you got it. And then Teddy proceeded to like make the beat and everything, drum machine, like right there. He basically made a remake of the song in real time, and they started playing the song. Like, and
wow,
it's just a testament to how much talent he had. And I saw somebody in the chat, right, like there were like a lot of dope producers at Uptown. One of the reasons why there were so many quality producers is because from the gate, the bar was set really high. Like I said, it was Teddy Riley and Marley Marl. So everybody else that came through Uptown, myself, Albie Shore, Kyle West, Pete Rock, for all the producers, Teddy, anybody tell you Teddy and Marley, and especially Teddy, was the standard. Everybody was chasing. Everybody was saying, yo, we trying to, Teddy made My Prerogative. We all right. We trying,
right.
Ash fire bomb hits, and that was the flag. That was what the standard of excellence was. So that's why you have so many great producers, because everybody was like, that's what you were looking at. It's like, yo, I'm on the team with Michael Jordan. I'm in the league. I'm on the team with Tom Brady. I'm on, like, the person is demanding excellence. You like, okay, Tom Brady's throwing, I better be catching these passes, or Michael Jordan's here. All right, got 50. I better got 35. You know what I'm saying? It was just your standard to yourself of the type of music you wanted to make. The bar was set really high, and it was a good thing. It was a good thing. It brought everybody. It's like I guess that saying, like, I guess iron sharpens iron, or that. It was that type of mentality, and that helped everyone else excel as far as them being producers and songwriters and what have you.
I mean, Jimmy, listening to Eddie, you had two big albums that came out to around 88. You had I'll Be Sure and you had Guy. I mean, it must have been like crazy to be able to push those two records, because Guy's debut album changed the game, the whole introduction of New Jack Swing, and you had Al, who was, a pop superstar, crossing over.
But I was just
as promotion there.
Teddy was already Teddy. I see this guy Vaughn Johnson said Teddy produced the show.
Yep.
All right, and he was about 16 years old, 14 years old. Ain't no telling how old he was. He was already a prodigy coming out of Harlem already.
Right.
Like he said, he was in Sylvia's
right.
band, and he probably was only 14, 15 years old, conducting the band, leading the band, making the beat right there and everything. So, like I said, in the beginning, Andre would be sitting down with Teddy, designing it, how it would look, what the sound would be like, what kind of haircuts people would have, and then Teddy was like, I got it, and then go make it.
Right.
And the swing beat, that
Yep.
swing beat, that right there is, I don't know if he's the inventor. Marley Marl had that, his version of it, and then Teddy, and then Eddie and Al after that. So Teddy had a lot to do with Al's progression as a producer. And so when they started making their albums, Teddy did a lot of work on Al's album, and Tenny Gatlin sang some stuff on there that with Al blended their voice, and Al did a lot of work on Teddy's album, the Guy album. Yep. So, he sang on it and their voices got blended. And Timmy Gatlin only did one album with Teddy, but he had a lot to do with the production and the vocal production as well. You know what I mean? And he did a.
But then, as an executive, when Groove Me came out, though, how was that to sell to radio?
It
how,
was very easy to sell at that time. It empowered me to have anything else. I had not only Al's album, Heavy's album. Now we got the Guy album, which took a long time to get together because they had, Gene Griffin.
We all know about Gene Griffin. Yeah.
And it took a long time for it to get together. But when it came out, it was already set up to go because we already had that landscape covered already at radio, at commercials. We already had the touring situation already set up. So as soon as they came out, that record popped. The album popped. You know what I mean? Yep. People started just digging in the album. It wasn't no single. Everybody played damn near every record on that album.
Yeah.
Right. And Al's album was approaching 3 million at the time.
Right.
And wow. So, we had other artists coming out. Vanessa Sinquist, they were coming out. They didn't do as well as we expected them to do, but they made a presence in the industry. Like, for instance,
But why do you think so? Why do you think? Because I know Kyle did some production there, but why do you think they didn't do as well? Because you had Salt and Pepper doing their thing.
It was more like we had Sed G from Ultramagnetic MCs. Sed G is somebody that worked on KRS-One's first album, Criminal Minded, did the drum programming. He was a talented genius in his own right. And then, you had Kool Keith in there. Sed G did some production, Kyle did some production, and Eddie did some production. Eddie did half of the album, and then Sed G did the other half. So Eddie brings in Kyle to that album. And it just didn't marinate because, quite frankly, we was focused on Heavy D and the Boyz, Guy, and absolutely I'll Be Sure. And we were at Warner Brothers were pressuring Andre to make a decision.
Right.
And Andre had to make a decision to have his own label, own distribution company, or have that one act at Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers was like, either you get down with us, but we're not ready to spend as much money as General Busby is at MCA. Or you go ahead over to Universal with Sid Schomburg and Lou Wasserman and Gerald Busby. And Andre said, I'm going over to Universal with Sid Schomburg, Lou Wasserman, and Gerald Busby, which they owned Universal and MCA at the time. Like Eddie said, it was a powerhouse. They was already set up at radio with New Edition, Mint Condition, Jody Watley. They had, Lou Silas was the A&R there. They were already, Michael Haley was the promotional man who taught me a lot. He didn't teach me everything. My man Gary Harris taught me everything that was down with the whole movement of hip hop since the OnStar. And he was at Def Jam and everything. But Michael Haley was running MCA promotion and marketing at the time. And shout out to him, Angela Thomas, and Tate. They were very instrumental in helping me learn how to move around the country and what radio is and how you work radio. And retail too. Michael Haley taught me all of this and a lot of it. And then, a lot of it I had myself, but when you have records like that, you have a power at radio because now you have a bargaining chip because you can go to radio and say, I need you to play Vanessa Sinquist, damn near in heavy rotation, or you'll never see I'll Be Sure again in your life. And that's how we bargained. We went on the road with I'll Be Sure. I had Step Johnson, who was the president of Black Music at Capitol and head of promotion there. He gave George Harrell, shout out to George Harrell that did national promotions with me. Lou Tucker also, and Jeff Thomas, Tonya Savant, and so many other people. And I want to make sure I shout out everybody from Uptown because I don't want nobody to feel left out because all these people had a major part in helping this thing go, and especially the women at Uptown. They covered us and all the ridiculous shit we was doing. They made it, sensible for us. They made Uptown a clean cut label. Like they told us where to go, how to go, the difference between Martha's Vineyard and the Hamptons, how you break a record in the Hamptons with Bruce Willis sitting there, and Heavy D and Demi Moore and Leonardo DiCaprio. How do you get them to start loving this shit? As well as, you know, you going to Martha's Vineyard and you have it there, or going to the tunnel. We needed the whole spectrum to love Heavy D, I'll Be Sure, and the Uptown sound, the Uptown vision, the walk like, talk like, look like, whole presentation. You know, we needed the whole world to understand that. So when I went to radio, that's what I sold them on. I sold them like, this is Uptown. We talk different, we walk different, we look different. When you see that cat represents hits.
Right.
That's what that cat represents. Yeah. And who are the hit makers? Eddie F, I'll Be Sure, and of course Teddy Riley, and absolutely Marley Marl.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you think about it, then, so you've got I'll Be Sure blowing up, and you had Guy with the debut album blowing up. So Eddie, when you guys are doing Big Time, I mean, is there less pressure on you guys doing Big Time, your third album? So your second album?
So first of all, it's more pressure because it's always the sophomore album is the pressure.
Right.
But also there was a little bit of a spat at that point, and Gene and Andre had a disagreement, and and Teddy was kind of, he worked with us, but he worked with us just because of his relationship with Heavy. He really loved Heavy, and we were all friends. And so he's like, I'll still work with y'all, but he couldn't work with us extensively. So he did one record. We got our own thing, which means now I had to step up. It's like, okay, you learned everything on the first album. Now you on. You're a producer now. You gotta now, in which I had to do. And I produced the majority of the second album. I did You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet. I did Somebody For Me, and a bunch of other songs, Move For Love. And then a lot of those songs, and then at the same time, I was co-producing some of those songs, Big Time with Pete Rock and with Neville Hodge. And they were coming, they were in the same stage I was in when I first was with Teddy. Now they were the co-producers coming up. And I was like kind of showing them what Teddy had showed me and what Marley had showed me, and the sensibility that Andre had given me. But one thing I want to say, I was going to say earlier, this is one of the things I analyze about Uptown Records. I'm not even sure if I even discussed this with Jimmy. One of the reasons I feel that Vanessa Sinquist and some of the other artists didn't have the same success is because I noticed with Uptown, we started having and it wasn't even intentional, but we started having quote unquote self-contained groups where there was a producer in the group. What that did was it just gave those groups, Heavy D and the Boys, Al with Al being a producer, Guy with Teddy being a producer, it gave
Jodeci,
the group was a little bit more nimble and able to fix things if there was a problem, meaning, hey, we need a remix. If you need a remix for Guy, Teddy's going in there and do it like tomorrow, today. If you need something for Heavy D and the Boys, if you need a Sprite commercial, if you need a TV track of a certain record, if you need a remix, or if this mix is not right, Eddie F is going to fix it right now, today. If if something is wrong, my vocals is too high on the mix, he's going in the studio and fix it himself today. So that was a little bit of an edge, and what it did was and so when you have, 5 different artists and you're trying to like manage everything, it's like some of the groups that could help themselves a little bit more because maybe they had a producer in the group, they were just able to like help the company solve some of the problems as far as production logistics. So that made it a little bit easier. And then you saw that trend down the line, which didn't break really until when Puff came. Then you saw like, okay, the kind of like the first generation of non-self-contained groups that were really kind of like breaking out the box. Because before that, we had a lot of artists that had songs, had singles. We did have Jeff Redd had success. Horace Brown had success. So there were some like what do you call it? Like there were some alternative that didn't necessarily go with that formula, but that was the formula when you had those 3 albums, and that was a special time because I remember that was the first time I realized that we're changing the sound of music because we had our first album out, and then that was 1987. Then in 1988, Al and Guy both had their album out. Then we came out with a new album in 1989. And that was the first time because I saw in my neighborhood, my like people, they were excited over Al B. Shaw. They were playing all the Guy records. We already had success. They were excited about Heavy D and the Boys. And I said to myself, it's the first time I realized something is happening here because all of the young people were excited about Guy's album. They were super excited about Al B. Shaw. Who is this heartthrob, light skin, curly, baby curly hair, and it was a mania for Al, girls like stampeding. And I sat back one day and said, yo, we're actually changing music because as a DJ, I saw something that I had seen before with say like maybe a New Edition or maybe other artists where I saw like a mania being created. And now I saw that with Uptown Records, but I saw at the same time, you got Guy, Al B. Shaw, and Heavy D and the Boys with albums out all at the same time. And people are listening to all this music and it's all on the radio in different stations. And some stations, all 3 of us are playing at the same time. So Jimmy is like he said, like, yo, I'm on fire. And if you don't play this, you might not never see Al B. Shaw again until 5 months from now. You better play.
Or forever. We're going to skip over your little station.
Yep. So
big stations became little. And I became friends with most of the program directors, general managers, and owners of the station because I had a product that they needed. They needed it for their Superfest. They needed it for their concerts. And at that time, the record company would pay for all the promotional tours and stuff like that. They would pay for the hotels. They would pay for the, to set up the concert. They would pay every aspect of it. And the plane tickets, travel, lounging, everything. And it cost a lot of money because, when rap came in before Eddie, it was relatively cheap to move artists around. But when Eddie came in with a full production, now you got equipment, you got to move around, and the artists. Before any of that, the big bands like Blood Soul or whatever, Brainstorm or any of those bands, they have 15 people in their band. Rap came in and eliminated, like, we're not hiring you guys. What I mean? Now, we want the DJ, the MC, and maybe 2 dancers. And 2 turntables, and that's it.
Right.
Not even your speakers. Don't bring no speakers and none of that. But when Eddie came in with the full production, it was a whole nother game. We right back to spending money again.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But the difference was, too, is that the record company had to pay for that. Now, these days, if you bring an artist in that's hot, say like they might get $600,000 a night. Now, they will do it for you for $300,000 a night.
Right.
But the only difference is their writer is still another $300,000 because they fly private jets.
Right.
Not 1, but 3.
Right.
Jimmy, when you think of, as I said, with Al and Guy blowing up as it is, how hard was it then, as I said, when you think of Big Time, when he came out, Teddy was able to do We've Got Our Own Thing, which was a major, I think G Wiz said he loved that compared to Somebody For Me, but it was the New Jack Swing type of, it was a very different type of beat and very grimy New Jack stuff. But but I think was Somebody for Me, that was an international hit. I mean, that was massive in
Right.
Nigeria, especially having Owl on that. For you, Eddie, as you know, being producing the album, did you have a preference as to which single came out first, or did Jimmy, who makes that decision for that big
Oh,
time?
well,
Yeah, you.
Me personally, I was always I was a Teddy Riley fan. Period. Still a Teddy Riley fan. So I produced somebody for me. Teddy Riley produced We Got Our Own Thing. So you asked me, I was like, We Got Our Own Thing should absolutely be the single. It's Teddy Riley, like, and I have no problem being the next single to.
Right. And I think the way that we picked a lot of records is that we would have like a staff meeting, like Eddie was saying. The janitor would come in there if your record was whack and say, "No, that shit is whack."
Right.
You need to go with this record, and he would have an opinion. Not that it would be taken. It wasn't taken lightly. Like everybody had a part in. A lot of people had a part in, picking and arguing about the record. You know what I mean? And one of the groups that really we used to have to argue down was Jodeci. They definitely wanted to pick their own records. Yep. And a lot of times that wasn't the record. When they picked Gotta Love over the Come and Talk to Me, and that's when Puff stepped in and made that hip hop remix. But the thing about it is he was saying that he invented the hip hop remix. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. He learned how to do the hip hop remix because he learned. I'm gonna say this. He learned this from our system. Eddie F, Albie Shore, Teddy Riley. People covered him and showed him. He lived with them, and then he learned. And he's a master, and he's a genius. So the only thing you gotta do is just show him a little bit, and he can take the plane and fly away with it. You know what I mean? He's gonna kill it. And he did kill it. And, he changed us. Getting back to what Eddie said, the music part of it, when you said halftime, you were saying that, this was a grimy New Jack record. But you got to realize we were transitioning from New Jack swing to hip hop and R&B.
Right.
All right. So New Jack swing is getting ready to be like the Motown sound.
Right.
Now we in a new era.
Right. We're going from the Marines to the doo-wop to the disco era. It was kind of like changing. So New Jack Swing was more like the original Uptown sound, but then it was switching more to like hip hop R&B and hip hop soul.
Right. So by the time we get to Puff Daddy, we in full bloom of hip hop and R&B.
Right.
I know, but before you get to Puff, now we have Father MC who joins in.
Yes.
And for you guys
Father set it off for everybody, but Father set it off introducing Jodeci first. With Treat 'Em, and then with Mary J. Blige. You know what I mean? And then he had a background vocalist, Terry Robinson, who was the airy swing beat sound, beautiful heiress of music. You know what I mean?
Terry and Tabitha were the voice of, I call them the voice of Uptown because they were on Albie Shore, all his records, all the backgrounds. They were on Heavy D and the Boys. They were on the Sprite commercial. They were on
Guy. Terry wrote with Aaron.
They're them. They're the You Can Do What You Wanna. They're them. All those voices, those are Terry and Tabitha. They were like so many voices on. They're the Every Little Thing You Do on Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
On all, they're like on out of 20 of the Uptown Records smash hits, they're like the voice on 15 of them, and the commercials and the theme songs, and they were the go-to people when you made songs. It was literally like, call Terry and Tabitha. They gonna come in. Terry's gonna write it. They gonna write the hook. They gonna fix you, and then your backgrounds and everything are gonna sound right. And that became like a sound. And that became a standard. That became a standard of, just like how Teddy was a standard, a certain level of backgrounds and background production was a standard that of quality that also came with Uptown Records.
Yeah, no.
So by the time we get to Father MC, you know, Father had been making records before Puff gets on the scene. And then what Puff does is help these records with the remixes that he did, and also helping with some of the fashion with Jodeci. And it's not only Puffy, it's Sybil and it's Misa as well, assisting him and giving him ideas because they're studying the street. Our whole thing is about from the street to the boardroom, from Harlem to Hollywood. That's how we get down. And we're unapologetic about who we are because we're not just street people that ain't educated. We have a clean-cut, educated look. It's very different than everybody else. Heavy D was making records with Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, and people that would normally damn near didn't like rap music.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, Eddie was Father MC not I mean, even I wouldn't say a rival to Heavy D and the Boyz. I mean, it just seemed like you had two hip hop artists on the same label. Did it just seem like?
No, not a rival. And also, I worked with Father. Like I did like One Night Stand and a lot of the songs on that album, or Close to You. It wasn't a rivalry. Inside of Uptown is what I was saying earlier. It was a standard of, everybody was looking at, okay, New Jack Swing, hip hop R&B, Teddy Riley set the bar here, and then Uptown is the embodiment of that sound. But then now you have Andre and Jimmy and bringing the how you walk, how you talk, the fashion sense, like what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to look like. And now you bring all that together. And then it was really us against everybody else. Because at one point, what was happening was every time Uptown put out something, the whole industry they were still trying to catch up from the last thing. So it was like, hey, I'll Be Sure's out. Everybody's trying to see if they can find an I'll Be Sure. It's like, good luck. Guy's out. Okay, everybody's trying to find a guy. Good luck. It's like, okay, Mary's out. Everybody's trying to find a Mary. Good luck. Then it's like, oh, we didn't even catch up. We didn't even find a guy yet. And then here comes Jodeci. It's like, you didn't even find a guy. And now we got like,
and then we had all artists that never made it to the forefront that were superstars. Yeah. And, you know, like I see the young person on here. They said, like, Key West, Kyle's group. With
what happened to that? Yeah, what happened to Key West?
It just never materialized because we had so many powerful groups at the time. It's hard to schedule all that. We basically took over MCA's scheduling of all their other groups. Like we moved their group, they had to be pushed back. We had so many, so they had to still have room for them because right now we're starting to basically take over the joint.
Right.
And regardless, they had to slow us down with Bobby Brown.
Right. And there were I always say Uptown Records had the dopest roster of people that didn't even get to come out, which was like you had like Fully, you had Anthony Hamilton, you had Key West, you had
Nesto, Andre Wilson.
And these are like, these are not these
Crystal Johnson, Tammy Lucas.
Yes, and I like these artists on another label they're like the
superstar.
The premier like artists coming out immediately on Uptown. It was so crowded, like Jimmy was saying, it was hard to come out. You know, and I don't know how many people, for example.
And it was painful too. It was painful for these people not to come out. It was painful for Vanessa Sinquist not to go forward. You know, on our roster. It's painful. Like I, you know, literally cry over that, and because they were like my children. I brought them around the world. I executive produced their first album that didn't do anything, and I went and got Eddie and Said G, two very different styles of producers, and they didn't support it, but I supported it. Like even a lot of times when records didn't work, even with Heavy, when he had the Blue Funk album. and there was a record that Andre didn't want to go any further with that album. You know, we had put out 2 singles. He didn't want to go any further with that album. I think that was your lowest selling album, right, at the time, right? And
Yeah,
so I was arguing with him about this particular single, and you know, they shut it down on me. They shut it down on me, and you can't put a record out without you know, promotional money behind it, marketing money behind it. You have to have money behind it, you know.
What was the idea, Eddie, about doing Blue Funk? Because I mean, I bought all the albums, so no, that wasn't an issue. But what was the idea of going, you know, going away from what was successful for you guys? Because Peaceful Journey, probably my favorite. I don't even know which is my favorite. I think Peaceful Journey is my favorite. And then you go.
I'll be honest with you. Peaceful Journey was that was when it was. I think Puff was more kind of experimenting. Heavy was leaning a little bit more, wanted to do a little bit more street. Puff was, his star was rising, and it was went against what we normally did. I actually didn't produce any songs on Blue Funk. I didn't do anything on Blue Funk. I did the majority of Big Time. I produced the most songs on Big Time. I produced 1 song on Peaceful Journey, which was the title track, Peaceful Journey. I didn't do anything on Blue Funk. I didn't do any songs. Actually, as a matter of fact, and you know, again, this is an honest conversation. When Blue Funk came out, that was around the same time I was doing songs with Father MC. I did One Night Stand. So probably a lot of the songs that I probably would have ended up putting on our album ended up probably, I didn't have the records made. We made them in the studio, but just from a creative standpoint, I ended up making records for Father MC. And then One Night Stand was the first single off of his album. So I was producing still those type of musical hip hop records. But Blue Funk was a less musical hip hop album. It was more going. We had started with "You Can't See What I Can See" that Chad Elliott did, which was a super dope record. That was like an in between album record. But that I think in a way, because "You Can't See What I Can See" was so dope, I think that kind of might have gave a little bit, might have tricked us a little bit of like, hey, maybe we should go in a harder direction and go more hard. And then we ended up doing more street songs like that. But our audience, I think, they were looking for the musical Heavy D.
Right, they didn't want that. And I'll tell you that radio resisted that. They rejected it, you know what I mean? Yeah. And they weren't feeling that. But there was some, because they were used to, you know, like Heavy doing self-destruction. That's cool, but you know, that's not you, baby. You know, that's KRS-One, that's Public Enemy and whoever. You know, that's not you.
Right.
You know? And I had a hard time at radio developing that record. And you know, You Can't See What I Can See. I wanted that to be that record. And Andre and I was arguing about it, and then they just put the same thing with Finesse and Sinquist. When we went from the first album to the second album, those records weren't what Andre wanted to hear. Like that wasn't the representation, because we had everything. We had the image. They had a flyer image, then Salt and Pepper, and they were on tour with Salt and Pepper at one time. But Salt and Pepper had commercial records that took them into a whole nother stratosphere. And but not that they were a better group, but they had those records and they went on tour, and they gelled on tour. But actually they gelled with Heavy better than they gelled Finesse and Sinquist. And we were always accustomed to, all right, Heavy's going out. Now Finesse and Sinquist is going to ride off for Heavy D and the Boys. But, you know, and then the next group is going to ride off of them, you know. And then,
yeah, but Jimmy, when as an executive, when Heavy is doing Blue Funk, don't you guys listen to it and think, "Whoa, Peaceful Journey"?
At that point, you can't tell Heavy nothing.
What And something else I want to add to that. There's something I forgot that's very important. The other thing too, and I didn't realize this till years later. We had, everybody knows we had a tragedy in the group, which Trouble
Troy.
But
that's what it really was about.
When if you look at Heavy D and the Boys, look at the album covers. You see
it's dark.
Living Large, and it's like everybody's happy. We got on sweatsuits, Nike. Then you see Big Time. We got a little money. We dressed up. We got the gold. We got it's Big Time. Then the tragedy happens with Troy. The next album cover is black, and it's me, D-Wiz, and Heavy, and we all staring off into. And then album after that is blue. It's blue funk. It's like, so the group is kind of going through right in front of you. The group is going through experience, trying to figure out, get our footing back after coming off the tragedy of losing our brother. And so we come from that to black to blue, and then we don't come together as a group again until Nothing But Love. But now you see us, the colors back. We got on leather coats, but it's more like, okay, we grown men now, and we went through something, and you see that, and you also hear that in the music. The music is like kind of trying to, it's a little bit, and I didn't realize this as it was happening, but when you look at it, that's kind of the explanation, because, when somebody's going through an experience like that, and then Heavy, like Troy was Heavy's best friend, besides Trouble T. Roy and D.O. was Heavy's best friends. Shout out to
Word up.
He lost one of his two best friends, period. So then you can't just say, just get back in the studio, just start being happy, and it's because it's like he's dealing with that, he's trying to get through that, and the music, the album covers, everything reflects that, and it takes us all the way up to Nothing But Love to say, now you see Heavy kind of like having fun again, but we went through a painful experience, and it took 2 or 3 albums to get back to being Heavy D and the Boys, and it's still Heavy D and the Boys. It was just like we've gotten back as far as we could get back to, but we still don't have our brother here with us.
And another thing, the record company and the promoter, when you're dealing with like on the Superfest, they like the show must go on the next day. But Heavy and those guys left the show that when that tragedy happened. They just left, and we were being faced with being sued. And then the record company also is like, yo, you gotta get back out there. And artists, you really can't treat them like that though, because like especially a successful artist. I'm gonna tell you something. When you sign an artist that's really special, that's really talented, at first you're the boss. By the second album, you got partners. The third album, you're getting fired. All right? Unless that artist really, really, that's why you see Teddy with 30 managers. All right? So that's that, and Andre was a master at gathering people back together. Like, yo, listen, we're going to do this. Let me throw a little bit more money your way. And what you need, a house? You got your mother need a house, right? Your mother need a house? Yeah. Let me put you right, get you feeling good again. He's the master at making you feel good again.
Yes.
There's nobody ever going to be like Andre Harrell.
Nobody. I go places, to this day, and somebody's trying to hype me, gassing me something. I'm like, forget it. I was raised by Harrell. You'll never. Best, right. He's best ever, and I'm not the only. I've heard other people in television, film, white people say Andre Harrell's the best salesman that ever lived. Motivator, period. He just knew how to touch people and make people feel good.
And also, he opened Uptown up to. It was a, it was inviting to everybody. Everybody. It was about the celebration to him, and not your race, not your height, not anything. If you have flavor, you can have no legs and a t-shirt on. And if you had flavor, you was in. If you had a position that you stood on and it was hot, it was like Clark Kent would say, Andre said, yo, what you think about this? He said, Andre would say, I think this record is hot. And Clark Kent would say, that's not it. That shit is whack. And Andre would be like, you right. That shit is whack. Trash it. And Clark was like unofficial A&R at Uptown as well. You know what I mean? He would let Clark listen to all the records, and then he would move on. Andre was that type of person. Like if he respected you, your ear or the way you wore your shirt or your sneakers, like Teddy had pulled up with the white BMW. Next week, Eddie had one.
No. I had the white. I had the white BMW. Teddy had the
whatever. Y'all had the same 3 niggas with the same BMWs.
And I'm just gonna say for the record, anybody can challenge me. You could go check the tape. My M3 was the flyest of everybody. I studied and I passed that assignment. And Andre used to say, yo, you see Eddie F's M3? Eddie F.
It was crazy. But that was going on. It was competition at every level at that point right now. Like, who could get the best record out, who had the flyest whip, who had the biggest house in New Jersey. Where did you live at? You live in Alpine? Okay. Yeah. Did you move to Cresskill first? That was the wrong move. All right. Yeah. Cloister Dock Road was the right move. Yep. And Gary Harris is the one, again, who found D'Angelo, who helped mentor Q-Tip and the boys and Run DMC and everybody, and then Heavy D and the boys and everybody. He was the smartest, rudest human being on the planet. But he was a genius.
Right.
He taught people about music. He read books, like 2 and 3 books a day.
Yep.
Went to Northeastern with Wendy Williams.
Yep.
And he was a big, imposing fella. And he was like beat you down to build you up. He would beat you down to build you up, to make you better. And he did make everybody better. He definitely made me better.
Yep. And Gary was special. Gary was in circles with, he would be like, I'm talking to Ted Fields or Ted Turner. I'm dealing with billionaires. Like he would just be, he was a hip hop soul aficionado, but he would be just dealing with billionaires and other people way before.
Fred Koppelman, Brian Koppelman at EMI, like just he worked for everybody. Irvin Azoff, and got fired by everybody too.
Eddie, what do you think happened to Nestor? Because he could have been the big Latino hype.
I think what happened. I don't think that those projects towards the end, Nesto, Key West projects, I don't think that they failed. I think what happened was there was a transition and Andre was on the way getting ready to go to Motown. He didn't know it yet, but so my point is those artists and those records, they never got a chance to say, okay, let's remix it. Let's have the second single. Let's regroup. It didn't get to have the whole process. Like for example, Heavy D and the Boys. We had Mr. Big Stuff. Then we had Chunky But Funky. We had the Overweighter. Then we had the Overweight Lovers in the House and the album. So it was a process before before we got to know who we are, got our feet under. So some artists sometimes they needed that process, and like Nesto was in that process. Key West was in that process, and then next thing you know, Andre's like, okay, now Gerald Busby gets fired from Motown. They're looking for somebody. An opportunity comes, and then now Andre's like, all right, I'm about to go over to Motown, and I think that's what happened. I don't think it's that like those groups just failed. I think that Andre was leaving, and then they didn't get the second, third chance or whatever it was for them to develop. They just never got off the runway.
Because you gotta remember.
Did you produce Nesto?
What's that? I didn't produce Nesto. No,
Did
I
you-
didn't. I didn't.
you didn't?
Did Mark and Corey do that? Did they do Nesto?
I'm not
I
sure.
don't remember.
Yeah, Mark and Corey did some records, but they, you know, I'm not sure. I don't even know if Devontae did some records. But what I was getting ready to say is that you said something earlier, Eddie, that about producers having a producer in the group. And
Yes.
most of the groups that didn't get to go to the next level with Uptown, they didn't have a producer in the group, and you still needed that. And all these producers, they got something from the producers before them.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So Teddy, Eddie, Al,
Right.
then you know, we got Devontae coming in, learning,
Yep.
and already a genius already, but learning how to do what we do.
Right.
Do this thing.
And Puff. And Puff too.
And then Puff
wasn't in a
lived with
group,
Eddie
but
and lived
like
with
that.
Andre to study every single day. Everything, every phone call, every drum machine instrument, every sound, he studied way before he became an A&R. Because
Right.
Puff was Andre's intern, but he was Kurt Woodley's and then my intern, and
Right.
then, you know, everybody else's intern at the company that was there before him, which he
Right.
still got a grudge about. He's still mad about that shit.
Yep.
But then Eddie, but what? Because I think I heard that Puff came from Mount Vernon.
Puff
Was-
lived in Mount Vernon. He was originally he was born, I think, in Harlem, but then
In Harlem Hospital, yeah.
he moved to Mount Vernon, and he actually was I think I want to say, and this may be wrong, but I want to say Puff's parents or mom and Tim Dog Patterson's family were close, and then Puff ended up staying or living with Tim Dog, and then or something like that, and then he went to Catholic school, Mount St. Michael's, and Mount St. Michael's is in the Bronx, but it's literally one block over from Mount Vernon. There's like Kingsbridge Road of Mount Vernon, and Mount St. Michael's is on the other side. The school, so it's basically the Bronx, but it's right there in Mount Vernon. And so, and then Puff, like he said, was an intern. He came up, but before all of that, before we even made records, there was a crew of guys called the 7 Up Crew, and Groovy Lou, which now is Groovy Styles, and the guy who does a lot of the styling for like Rick Ross and Jeezy and Lil Wayne, hangs with Puff. The guy who named Sean John for Puff, he's from Mount Vernon. He was the leader of this crew called the 7 Up Crew. And they were the guys who had all the fashion, everything first. They had the high top fades first, the polka dots first, the patent leather shoes. They would come to high school. They would go downtown, go shopping, whether it be in the Village or Harlem, and come back with all the fly styles. And in that crew, it was Groovy Lou, it was Rick Burton, George Waller, and I know I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave some people out. I want to say Tommy George, but also Puff was in that. He was one of the guys in the 7 Up Crew. So they would come to parties. When I did parties, we would always let them in free because they were the flavor guys. They would get in the circle, they would start dancing, like so they would always elevate the party, and they would fly. They always had the latest styles, the latest haircuts or whatever. And so when we got our record deal, then Puff went on to college, went to Howard, but then he saw what was happening with us in music, and then he was lobbying Hev to help be his manager or help him break into the music business, and then Hev recommended him as an intern. But then while he was an intern, he was interning for Andre and Kurt and Jimmy. Then he lived at my house with me. He came and stayed with me and lived in my loft. Like, and I had the studio in the basement, and I was starting Untouchables, and I had all the Untouchables stuff going. So he got a front seat to all of that, like how Untouchables was being developed, how we made records. He could go in the studio and play the songs. It was like, and also my man Sugar Dice, who was also at Artist Development with Uptown with Jimmy.
Dice.
And
Shout out.
he lived with me too. So it was me, Puff, and Sugar Dice. They lived at my house. So he was getting training from both sides. He was getting the training at the office, but then he was also getting the music training. Like, okay, I got the front seat to Eddie F, the Untouchables, whatever they're doing. And then I got Sugar Dice over here coaching me as far as whatever I need to just, as far as who I need to know and networking and what have. So he was getting a full education from everybody there. And so
and the thing about Dice is Dice took everybody around the world and knew every hood, every restaurant, every place in Kingston, Jamaica, from South Africa to Ireland, because he was on the first Fresh Fest tour. And before that, he was in the game, before Def Jam even started. And so Dice was like a grown man that had been around the world already. So he would take me to, and I'm like, yo, I'm in London. I don't know no radio stations or nowhere to go. Dice knew everybody. He knew the owner of the radio station, the restaurant, everything, and he's another person that taught everybody. And we had those type of people around training you up. And then the women at Uptown were very instrumental in the development of a Puff Daddy, me, or Andre Harrell. We had a lady by the name of Tracy Kimball. Her cousin was Gail O'Neill, the model, and she was a superstar. And Brad Johnson, who used to own the Cellar. So Cellar was a place where you would go and break records. And you would see an artist like Christopher Williams there. And Chris would be in the Cellar. And it would be crowded with Ashford and Simpson and all these people there, and whoever, Teddy Pendergrass, anybody, right? And Tracy Kimball was the one that says, listen, y'all going to Martha's Vineyard, that's cool, but I'm going to teach you about something. I'm going to take you to the Hamptons. And we're going to go to the Hamptons. Andre, you're going to buy a house there. And we're going to start doing the white party there. And the white party is based on The Great Gatsby. That whole event, the way that they dressed the movie, not even the book, the movie, the styling in it and everything. And F. Scott Fitzgerald is the author, right? And that style, that fashion, those white parties, but before the white parties, we did the cream parties at the Boat Basin in New York. Everything, and then we went to the Tavern on the Green, in Central Park. So everything we did was at a level that if you was cool enough to get there, you could get there. If you was a cornball, there was no way in. The invisible force field would go up and you get electrocuted if you even pass the line. So that's what happened with the white party. And, there's disputes about who invented it. Tracy Kimball showed us the way. Andre Harrell invented it.
Yeah.
But I guess at the heart of that, though, because if you're having, if you're elevating the label at, Hamptons and places like that, the core is always the music had to be current. And you went from the whole New Jack and you went from hip hop. Then you had, I think, did Mary or Jodeci take Uptown to another level? Who would you think took Uptown to the
first
third
of all,
level?
Father introduced them. Father was the one that introduced both of them. And so Father was he was the conduit and giving us that transition to Jodeci. Now we got Jodeci. Now we're redesigning Jodeci. And then the first album, before it was done, Puff Daddy comes in and starts A&R'ing it and bringing the young boy flavor. I think Eddie left at that time. I think Eddie was not at Uptown when Jodeci came. They still.
Oh, did you leave Eddie?
No. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I missed the part.
No, you were saying that by the time Jodeci came in, that you were moving.
No. I was there. I was actually in the office when they came. And,
okay.
I was trying to pop Celestin when they sang. I was like, yo, you should sign them right now before they go down the hall.
Right.
But what I found
and scoop them up.
Right. What I found out was everybody was saying the same thing. See, there's conflicting stories. It'll be like you'll hear Heavy told Andre he should sign Jodeci.
Everybody got a different story, but the true story is.
And I told him he should sign it. And I was in with Bob Celestin, was the general manager. But the truth is, everybody saw them. Everybody was in an office with somebody saying you should sign them kids.
Everybody. And the thing is that when Devontae learned, like I said, a lot of stuff, he was a genius already, you know, but he learned a lot of stuff from Al, you know, who wrote a couple of records or one record, the main record, Come and Talk to Me, right? And also produced that. So, and then, you know, Puffy comes in the fold and starts working with these different producers and Devontae. And Devontae was like learning. Like I said, the first album, it's all good. I'm welcoming all producers, everybody. Second album, I'm doing this whole thing by myself. I don't want no extra nothing from nobody.
But you know, you talk about New Jack Swing because you talk about Gotta Love and My Phone and stuff. But that album, that Forever My Lady album, was very much a model of the Guy album because it had.
It was the ballads, though.
The B side was all New Jack Swing.
Separated them.
But you know, around the world, so those of us in the UK and around the world, we actually loved the B side. The up tempo New Jack stuff was big, and then it's amazing how the ballads were the ones that really saved it.
And then Puffy
Eddie, as a producer,
with the ballads, the hip hop and R&B.
But Eddie, as a producer, when you heard the New Jack side, the Gotta Love and My Phone and all those songs, what was your take as a producer listening to those tracks compared to the Forever My Lady and Come and Talk to Me stuff?
There's a lot to unpack with this. I don't even know if there's enough on this interview to. And you can talk to Devontae. Actually reminded me the last time I saw him. Okay, never heard before. This is the real story. So this is what really happened when Jodeci first came. And they were living in the Bronx, and then I would just look out for different artists and different groups because I was just friends with everybody, and I would try and help whatever artists. So one day I went to see them, and they were in the Bronx,
at Andre's old apartment.
And they needed to get to the studio, so they came out of they were in the projects. They came out of the projects. They came down. They had SP12, big keyboards, everything. So I was thinking to myself, I called, and they didn't have a phone either in there. So I called Bob Celestin at Uptown. I said, what are y'all trying to do? Y'all trying to get these guys robbed? I said, you got them in the projects with, like, at that time, SP12 was like $2,000-$3,000. Keyboards were like $1,000. And I'm like, they in the projects with a bunch of expensive. They don't even have a phone. So if something happened, they have to run somewhere and catch a phone. So I said, what are y'all doing? Y'all need to get them out of here. So they ended up agreeing with me. They moved them to New Jersey. And then they got them a house. They rented them a house in New Jersey. And then I would go and work with the group all the time as far as not work with them musically. Let me rephrase that. I would go and see them, just hang out with them. Just from a friend standpoint, because I lived 2 towns away, probably 15 minutes away from where they were. And I would come, just get them, take them to get something to eat, take them to get haircuts, whatever it was. But there was a time where Andre, I don't know what was going on with his deal with MCA, but he was like, and I had bought Al to Andre. And Andre had always said, he had always thanked me for bringing him Al, and he was going to do something for me. I don't know what it was, what was in his mind. But then I found out, he's like, okay, I got too many artists on MCA, so I'm going to do a production deal. I'm going to put Jodeci with you and set you up to do a production deal. It's still going to be an Uptown deal, but I'm going to let you have your own deal somewhere else, and told me he was gonna basically let me work with Jodeci. Now at this time, I was still on the label or whatever. So long story short, Jodeci was supposed to actually be my group. Devontae will confirm this if you ask him. He just said it to me last year when I saw him. He said, "Yo, Eddie, remember we were supposed to be your group?" And then he broke the whole thing down. And what happened was, at the last minute, Guy ended up leaving Uptown. They were still on Uptown, but they were like kind of like not officially day to day listening.
G. Griffin got in the middle of it and effed it up.
The whole thing. So then Andre decides, he changes his mind at the last minute. We're gonna put Jodeci on Uptown. So he had kind of already told me he was gonna have me work with Jodeci. So of course I was upset and I was mad. I said, okay. And so that's probably why Jimmy thinks that Eddie was gone and had moved on, because at that point I was like, I was always the company man. I just did everything for Uptown. I helped everybody. Get their stuff set up, their drum sounds, whether people if they had money, didn't have money, I did remixes. No matter what the budget was, if there was no budget, I was just like, we win by all means necessary. So this was kind of like my thing where Andre was saying, I'm going to give something back to you for always just being somebody that was dedicated to making sure Uptown was successful no matter what was happening. And then he pulled that back. So I felt burned. So that actually is when Eddie F and Untouchables, then I had never really worked outside of Uptown. And then I did Johnny Gill remix, Rub You the Right Way, TLC, Ain't Too Proud. I started doing all these projects outside of Uptown. And I didn't work with Uptown for maybe a year. And that's probably why Jimmy feels like when Jodeci came, I went away. But what really happened is when it came time to do Jodeci's project, Andre ended up pulling back the deal and then saying we're just gonna keep them on Uptown. And then I was kind of pissed off. And then I don't know what happened. I guess they said, well, Eddie's not gonna do it, so we're gonna have Al do half the album. And where this is going is, so when you ask me about the records and the up-tempo side, and this is the part that nobody knows. I never even said this to Jimmy, and he's probably just finding this out for the first time. What was supposed to happen is Al was probably supposed to produce the ballad side, because he was very good at doing really thick, rich, great ballads, Killing Me Softly. He did all these dope productions type ballads. I was supposed to work with them and do the up-tempo side, but I was not there. So that part didn't get developed the way it was supposed to at the time. And so if you ask me as a producer, that's why I think the up-tempos didn't have the full, they were there, but they just weren't really all the way developed. There would be little tricks and little things you would do, things that Teddy may have taught us that then I ended up teaching my guys, or drum sounds that we ended up using, that we circulated. And that's kind of what happened. And that's why the up-tempo side was a little bit lighter, I would say. The music was there. From a musical standpoint, it was there. But there's something about New Jack Swing, hip-hop, R&B. Everybody thinks that it's something. Now it's normal because everybody mixes hip hop and R&B. But back then it was hard because you had certain machines, certain sounds, certain textures, and there was a certain way that if you didn't sound a certain way, it would be kind of like a little light. It would be a little fake, It was only within us. It was only within really Uptown. We kind of had the sound that was the quote unquote official sound. Then it ended up expanding to Rodney Jerkins and Timbaland and Pharrell, and then and then after that, then hip hop, R&B just spread everywhere. But so that first album, that's the story of that first album, and that's why the up-tempo side probably wasn't as polished production-wise, because I was supposed to help them with that, but things kind of went left. And that's the, and Devontae, you could confirm all this with Devontae.
Yeah, you remember when we lived in Cross Creek? You bought a place in Cross Creek. I bought a place in Cross Creek, and
Yes.
Andre moved Jodeci right behind Cross Creek on Jones Road in the house. So that they would be, you know, my daughter. They would come to my house early in the morning to eat my daughter's cereal because they haven't had their record out yet, and they didn't get their advance yet. But they was in that house going buck fooly. And they gave more parties than anybody with no money.
But Jimmy, you did. I heard that you helped Eddie, you know, when he left sort of Uptown to set up. Did you help him with Untouchables?
Yeah. Me and Eddie was always close. Like I said, he moved across Creek.
Yep.
We lived on the same lane, if you would, in Cross Creek. It's like a drive-in type of a gated kind of community, kind of. It's a very nice place. So he lived on one side, I lived on the other. He had a red Cherokee Jeep with gold rims, and I had a red Cherokee Jeep with gold rims. You know? And so we used to collaborate every night. Like how Andre and myself used to be. And was still like that. But before I would get to Andre, I go to Eddie's house and we start talking about what the music looked like, what his company would look like, his logo, this, that. We're trying to get to Gerald Busby, who already knew him already. You know what I mean? I was there when we went to Motown, when he first got the Johnny Gill record and everything like that. And we would talk about, I would, you know, help him with Untouchables, with the promotion. We also went to Warner Brothers, where Warner Brothers would treat you a certain way. They had a guy named Mike Conception, and he was in a wheelchair.
Mike Conception.
We was in Warner Brothers, and he was like, "What you brothers trying to do?" Nothing with you, but you know, good. We love
Mike. Yeah, Mike is my man. I did records with Mike.
He was like, you know, we've been dealing with Mike since we came to LA. You know what I mean? But it was all good.
Everybody, Sugar Dice was down with Mike.
Everybody. But so we sitting at Warner Brothers. Marlon Jackson is sitting outside in the lobby because he ain't got a hit, so you can't go in there. And King, God bless his soul, he was sitting outside in the lobby because he ain't have no hits. He wasn't even in the rec. So they would, if you wasn't hot, I'll be sure hot, Prince hot. What's the other guy? The club. What's
J King.
J King.
Oh, J King. Club Nouveau, yeah.
If you wasn't on that level right there, you were sitting in the lobby for hours.
They had everybody superstars. They had Madonna, Quincy Jones, Prince, Warner Brothers.
And Ice-T had his girl, whatever her, Darlene or whatever her name is, that was the superstar. So he go into Ernie Singleton's office, and Ernie, he'll be like, "Yo, I want $1 million for my next album." And Ernie would be like, "Are you crazy?" And Ice-T would be like, "I'm not talking no more. Let Darlene talk." And walk out of there with $2 million.
Right.
Warner Brothers was like
where did you take
a gigantic townhouse that Bugs Bunny lived in. We ran around that, me and George Harrell. Shout out to George Harrell, because we ran around Warner Brothers like, you know, like it's just a new playground. We coming from Universal already, but Warner Brothers was like a different type of animal. That Bugs Bunny is a whole other level of history.
But is that where you took Untouchables?
Well, this I wanted to add to something Jimmy was saying. So I was more like, when I was a student, this is what was really happening. Jimmy, they were already had Uptown, and I would ask questions, and Jimmy was like, basically, I knew how to make records and I knew production, but I didn't know anything about marketing, promotion, going to radio, going to college, and Jimmy knew all of that. And I was basically a student, but I would be listening. And just like when Andre told us, "Hey, you need to do this on your demo," and we ran home and do that. Fast forward years later, when I was in the game and I'm setting up my company, and Jimmy's like, yo, you need to do this, you need to do this, that, and the third. You need to get this person for retail. You need to make sure you get ask them. You need to make sure you have QRP in your agreement so that you can your promotion. You need to have your postcards, and I would do all that. I was mentally taking notes, and I would go back and I would do all those things. And that's part of what made Untouchables as a production company successful, because it was like a mini model of what they were doing at Uptown. And I was getting information. Jimmy was teaching me this what you need. This is how I set up the records. And then not only that, he was giving me the information. Then he was literally helping me with my records. Like when I came out with Pete Rock and Sell Smooth, he was promoting the record. He was sending it to his guys. Shout out to Michael Williams. And these guys are still in the game, powerhouses. I met all of these people through Jimmy. He's like, oh, all right, let me send the record to my man, Michael Williams. He's going to get you on in L.A. Mike,
on pop radio.
But he's the king of pop radio. He got all the whole West Coast. And it was true. And these were guys that, and again, Michael Williams is still, he's in the game. Yo.
Doing Taylor Swift. I mean, he's doing anybody.
Today, he's like, yo, congratulations to the team. We got another #1 with Usher. Like, he just did right now. Last week, took it #1. These are guys.
When he was at pop radio, that's what I was at R&B radio in the street. That also supersedes pop radio, because the street is where the records start at, though. You got to affect the street. But Michael was the only black guy at pop radio and music. When I went to Boston, so they had a radio station. It's basically a pop station, WILD. Elroy Smith was there. He didn't want to speak to absolutely anybody, and definitely not me. But Michael ushered me in and got me to say, this is how you work it. You work the receptionist, then you work up to the operations manager. You go to sales. You spend some money in sales. You buy some airtime for the record. So they give a little snippet of the record when you buy the airtime. Now you spend some money, and it was legal, and they heard the record. Now you can have a conversation with the, music director. Now you taking the whole station out to dinner. Now the music director, everybody except for the program director. And then now, eventually you get to know the program director, then the GM, then the owner, because it all depends on, do you have the product?
Right.
Product means, do you have the money?
not the hit. But why did you just? I was going to ask Jimmy. Why?
Go ahead.
No, why? Yeah, why did you decide to help Eddie venture off? Weren't you loyal to to Uptown to say, look, man, why did you help Eddie?
But at that time, we were all entrepreneurs, we're enterprisers. That's what Andre had taught us. Like, he taught everybody, like, this is not going to be, plus people were getting fired too. Like, you were looking at your future too. Like, people would get moved out. Hotter producers was coming in, and promotional people coming in. Sugar Dice was saying he could do my job better than me. To Andre, when he get a chance to talk to Andre by himself, all kinds of shit. So you trying to protect your neck, and you was looking towards the future though. Really, you wanted to stay there your whole life. But when it was time to go, it was time to go. Like when my brother Kurt Woodley found Mary, Jeff Red found Mary, and it got to the point where Andre and Puff was like, you're going to have to give up Mary. Andre was like, you're going to have to give up Mary as management if you want to keep your job. And Kurt was like, I'm definitely not doing that. So he had to move on. And then Puff steps in. You know what I mean? And that's how that worked out.
The other thing, too, is that Uptown was a very progressive company. Uptown was the first, and it was the only company of its kind at that time. So it sounds like now, why wouldn't you want to give out the information? A lot of information that Uptown was given, and Andre, Jimmy, everybody wasn't listening. It's like we we knew internally we should listen, and this is the strategy, and we trusted. But a lot of people on the outside, they just didn't understand. So, and then also Andre would and a lot of people, it went through the whole ranks. Andre, Jimmy, people would help other people. This happened even into later years. When I put out Donnell Jones' second album, You Know What's Up, I heard the story of Andre was in the Hamptons with the staff and people from Arista, and he was dropping science on my record, and he was arguing, debating, and lobbying the staff of Arista. Has nothing to do with the record. It's just that in his mind, this is one of my people, this is one of my sons, one of my guys. Eddie F got a dope record. And he's like, and from what I hear, he's like, yo, y'all don't get that. What's up? What's up? Y'all are ridiculous. And he had a whole table full of people breaking down and selling them. And that's the type of guy he was. He was a purveyor of the culture. So it didn't matter, is he getting a check from it? Is it signed to him? No, but these are my people. This is my crew. And not only that, this is a culturally significant song. It's hot. It makes sense. It's sexy. Y'all should be getting this because it pushes everything forward, and it's a dope-ass song. And it's one of my guys, one of the branches from my tree. And if y'all don't get this song, y'all are ridiculous. And then and the next week, they went back to work and pushed the button on the record. And I heard about, you know, Andre was out there lobbying for your song. He was, and I'm not gonna name the people he was talking to. He was like, he was cursing this person and saying y'all ridiculous and what's up? That shit. And so I'm just saying that to say, one, there was that. You would always give information freely. You would teach, you would help everybody in the crew, everybody in the circle. Jimmy was doing that with me. He was saying, this is Eddie. It was very much, remember, we came in the game, we were getting out of high school. They were getting out of college. So they were like not that far in front of us. They were like our big brothers. They were like your big brother that's 4 years, 5 years in front of you that's saying, yo, all right, this is what you should do. And more taking you under their wing. And that extended as the company expanded. You couldn't put every single record, every product. So it wasn't even looked at like you competing against Uptown. It was just like, you got something hot you doing over here. I'm going to help you. And it was a relationship and a network. And we were like all a family. So, and Jimmy was like, he basically taught me the whole game as far as marketing, promotion, all of that, how you set up your songs. And that's really one of the things that separated Untouchables from all the other. There was a lot of other people out here, producers that was making records. Some of them had artists. But the thing was, they didn't have a Jimmy to sit down with and learn. And how do you now take your artist when you leave the studio and then actually go to radio, go to, you know, college, go to, and then I had people like Angela Thomas, who was instrumental. She was at MCA. She was our regional in New York, but then she had moved on. She was vice president of marketing at Columbia, and she handled the whole Def Jam account, the whole Criss Cross account. Wow. So she was also a friend, and she was saying, you should do this. So between Jimmy, Angela Thomas, they gave me the whole, like, this is what you should do for your records. This is how you should set up your song. And I was listening. I was a student, and I was just listening, and then taking that advice, and I used that, and it helped me set up my artists and break my artists. But it was very much a family and a friendship thing. It wasn't looked at as competition.
I mean, the one question that everyone keeps asking is, how did Bad Boy impact Uptown? Did it lead to the decline of Uptown, the success of Puffy at Bad Boy? Did that lead to Andre going to Motown? Did that just change? Was that the beginning?
And I know Jimmy probably has an answer. He was closer to it than me. But from my perspective, it wasn't just only Puff. It was black music. You know, you had LaFace, and LaFace was with Clive Davis, and Clive, and you had Rowdy, and then you had Bad Boy, and Clive was really supporting his partners in black music, and he was taking those. He wasn't just confining those records to just R&B or just urban. He was saying these could be big pop records. So you had like Tony Braxton it was urban, but then it was crossing over big pop, like 10 million records. You had TLC, so I think Andre, it wasn't just Puff. It was that, yo, all around me, there's new companies popping up that are more successful than me, and I feel like, you know, I either need a partner that's going to give me more support, or I need to go somewhere where I can have more of my own support. I think that's what led to Andre going to Motown and leaving Uptown.
And I think, like, you're absolutely right. When you think about pop, the pop department, and MCA Universal, they did not want, we were looked at like a black music company, subsidiary to them. They didn't want us working our records at pop radio, at these pop mediums. And so that stagnated us a lot because we didn't get into these the charts the same way. Like he said that Arista would promote TLC. We had a Heavy D and the Boyz, but they didn't promote them. They never really had a pop top 20 album or record, you know, at pop radio. But they went number one at black radio and number one album at black R&B on the R&B charts. But they would stagnate us. You know, Jodeci probably never had a number one pop album. Then, if they would have came out now, they would have had every record they put out would have been a charting record that went number one. But they just resisted the fact, even if we work pop radio, because at the end of the day, you got to have a certain amount of power behind you when you go number one pop. There has to be a campaign, and a campaign costs money, you know, and, you know, the difference between pop, independent promotional money, or just marketing money, it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So that's the difference, you know. When you laying out $2 million for your campaign on a pop record, it's gonna, you know, and it's a good record on top of that. You know, there's no competition.
So that's probably why most Uptown artists did not win, say, the Grammys and stuff like that, compared to, say, Arista, where Clive was always behind his art. You know, so TLC
all
and
that
all
that. Yeah.
Yes, and L.A. Reid and Babyface, you know, which, see, I was fortunate enough. I also worked closely with L.A. Reid and then I became vice president A&R at LaFace. So I had an inside look to both companies, and it was just a total different approach. And I think so. For example, L.A. Reid was looking at great songs, period, not great songs, urban, great songs, pop, a great song. And I know from working closely with LA, he was like always going, like, I'm going to the top. There was no limitation. There was no feeling of like, this is going to be a black record. This is going to be, it wasn't pigeonholed or categorized. It was like, this is a great song, and we're going to take this song and this artist as far as we could take it. Whether that means, for example, you have Outkast. I love Outkast. I'm happy to have been at LaFace. Outkast won Album of the Year, sold 10 million albums. How many rap artists sold 10 million albums on, you know, and it was hot. It's hot music, not like it's and I'm not gonna name any other artists, but you know the predecessor artists where it's watered down and okay, we ain't really feeling in the hood. No, you felt Outkast is official, Andre 3000, Big Boy is official in the hood, and it still crossed over, went pop, sold 10 million and that's a testament to just saying, hey, I'm in an environment where I could just deliver great music, and yes, LaFace and L.A. Reid and Babyface is delivering the music, but then I also have a partner who's going to support me and say, yeah, we could take this record everywhere. Not going to say, no, let's just keep you over there. Let's keep you over there on that chart. And I think that was a great thing, and it was a great experience for me. Being at LaFace and working with LA and the whole staff of LaFace, and just seeing how he worked records, and how his whole process of just finding songs, working with artists, and not being scared to like break the mold and go outside of the box with a lot of different artists, and still to this day, still doing it to this day.
But both of you went to Motown with Andre. How? What would you say? Why didn't it succeed? Because you had the magic at Uptown. Why do you think it didn't succeed at Motown when you
I
guys were all
think
there?
you had to work with artists that was already there and
Yeah.
create a lane for the new artists, and that was a big problem for Andre.
And also it wasn't enough time. It wasn't enough time, and I'm explaining what I mean by that. When I got there 3 months later than everybody else. I didn't come immediately. And I'm again here, honest conversation. I had no intention of coming. I wasn't coming. They were calling me. I was like, no, I'm not coming. Thank you. I'm happy where I'm not coming. And what happened is the deal went to one level, and then the deal doubled, and then the deal went to another level, and another, and I wasn't even listening. I told my lawyer, stop, don't call me. I said, don't call me. And the way how I found out how crazy the offer was my lawyer called the general manager of LaFace, who's also a friend, Dorsey James, and told him what they were offering me. And then Dorsey James from LaFace called me and said, Eddie, some things only happen once in a lifetime. He said, you need to look at this deal, and I'll talk to LA. I'll talk to LA for you, because the deal was so crazy and so big, and because they had kept trying to like increase the deal to get me to come. And so I went there. But when I got there and I analyzed the whole, A&R situation, and I looked at the schedule, there was two things wrong. First and foremost thing, Jimmy wasn't there. Jimmy was not running the point on promotions and marketing. He understands Andre and how Andre works and the idiosyncrasies. And when Andre might say something, Jimmy was one of the people that, as his friend, could challenge him and be like, no, I'm not doing that, or we need to do this, or you need to slow down, or whatever it is. Whatever way they function, he would get him to do the right thing. Now Andre's working with people that are just straight working for him. They don't know him from Uptown. They don't know how he works, his process. That's on the promotion and on the marketing side. From the A&R side, I looked at the schedule, and I looked at what we're supposed to release, and I looked at the fact that when you release a certain amount, when you release an album, you need a lead time. You need a single, and you need say it's like whatever it is. I don't remember if it was 10 weeks or 16 weeks, whatever it was your lead time before you put the album out. And we were already 6 months in, and I went over the schedule. And I came into the office on Monday and I said, there's no way we're not going to be able to get all these albums out, because I said we would have to put an album out every 2 weeks for the next 6 months, because we were already behind. We were supposed to say if we were supposed to release 10 albums, and there were no singles out yet for those albums. So I'm like, in year one, we're not going to make the release schedule. You can't, because you can't throw the album out. You have to put a lead single, and then you got to take time. So that would put all the albums would be in the fourth quarter. We didn't even have the albums made yet. So what happened is the A&R department, me and Sugar Dice, we canceled our Christmas vacation. Most people go away on Christmas. We worked all through Christmas, everything. We got all the albums, all the music ready, prepared, everything, got it all done. We was recording through the whole, because we were already behind. Now, that wasn't my fault. I wasn't there. I just had got there. But it was a problem that had to be dealt with. But now we had the records, but now you still got the log jam and marketing, because you still have to set these records up. And Jimmy knows I was calling him every day. I was begging him to come work at Motown, because I was like, Jimmy, we need you. We need you. And I knew there was a track record of all the records at Uptown. whenever Jimmy, for whatever reason, if Jimmy dropped out and it wasn't him and Andre wasn't vibing and he went on a vacation, those records didn't win. Those records always failed. It was just a thing that happened at Uptown. And so I had already seen it again, and Jimmy had already taught me the game and the promotion and marketing game. So I'm like, if Jimmy's not here, he's not gonna be able to. Nobody's gonna be able to translate and gonna be able to take these songs and deliver them. And then Jimmy was like, "Man, I'm not coming. I'm not coming inside." And Jimmy never came. And what I think Jimmy wasn't there, so the songs there was nobody to translate and help Andre get the songs through the marketing process and through the promotional process. That's what I think. And it caused a log jam and a backlog.
But that's true. And then the other part of it is that I got a label deal there, and so I set up my operation down the street. And, I was building studios, managing producers and artists. And also I had a marketing tool, which was J Love Spot, my barbershop, which was right across the street from Motown. And Andre wanted me to come back. And this is a true story. Andre wanted me to come back, but he wanted me to fold in my label deal as my salary. And I was like, that's absolutely out of the question. And so we were always arguing about that, but he wanted me to come back, and I wanted to come back. I was going to come back and fire the whole promotional staff, and just start over from scratch, and redesign how the records would come out, the schedule, and you have to set it back. You have to shut it down and set it back and push it back and let the records come out accordingly and properly. So a record, you put a record out, an album, you get an album together. The first single comes out in 3 months. All right. You take 3 months to work that single, and then you drop the album. Or you go for another single. So you take 6 months to drop 2 singles, and then you drop the album immediately after that, 3 months later. So traditionally, if you do it the traditional way, it's 9 months. It's a single, and then an album. It's a setup. And if you don't set that single up and let it marinate in the street or whatever, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And then you're going to get your answers from the street and radio too. You're going to get your, this is a hit. It ain't a hit. All right, let's crash this right now and move on to the next single. Let's get the right single right. You know what I mean? A lot of times you put out that first single and it ain't the right one.
Right.
And you got to go and regroup and get it right, and then you got to get the remixes in rotation as well, so it's a whole process, and you have to, roll out these records properly. And then when you not vibing, or you and the boss don't have a connection as a promotional man, you don't know how to get across to him. Listen, I need more time to develop these records, because Andre's like, yo, I need to have my hit on radio tomorrow. You hear records on the radio? You hear LA's records on? Why the fuck my records ain't on the radio?
Right.
Yeah, but why didn't he work as hard to get you as he did with Eddie then?
He did. He had a deal already.
Yeah,
with Jimmy.
I had a 5-year label deal with him. Yep. Right. I was there after Andre was gone.
I didn't know that he had a deal. But he needed Andre. I mean, he realized probably after the fact he needed Jimmy to help him with the marketing and promotions. He was, I guess, from what Jimmy's saying, he was trying to bring him in, but instead of saying, "Okay, you have your deal, and I'm gonna pay you separately to do that," he was trying to say, "Fold that into your deal," which was that.
And I wasn't doing that. Even if he wouldn't put out any of my records, I would. I wasn't doing that. And because I got advised by Clarence Avant, you'd be crazy to do that. And then I wanted to come back, and I wanted to be with my family. And, even Andre hired my friends instead of me, and they couldn't help either. You know what I mean? Because quite frankly, I'm the general and the leader of the ship. and nobody can do what I do. You know what I mean? And nobody's going to take it to where I take it. Like I'm saying that when I got a record, I'm a adult older man at this point right now. I'm in my 40s, 50s, whatever, 40s. So I'm going into places that no promotional people go to. I'm going around the world, country. I'm going to get this record played and get it hot on the street first. And I got an army at this point now of people that I work with independently. But at Uptown, I had 9 people that, I hired. But I had 200 people that worked for me. And indie money would come in. I wouldn't take that money to go get a record played. I would take that money to go hire people and give people a salary and put them in at work, and they could be guaranteed a job. We would have 15 records to work. So if I got 50,000 a record, you know what I mean, and my budget always got cut up. Like if I was supposed to get 100,000, I got 50,000. And in the beginning, if I was supposed to get 50,000, I got 25,000. Just to make this thing go. But I took that money and hired people around the country. Whether they was Blackstone Riders from Chicago, gangsters from LA, or somebody that's just graduated from college from LA. Tonya Savant was a young lady. I hired half of Howard University. That's the first thing. So Tonya Savant, she's a lawyer now. She's a very successful lawyer, but she doesn't practice law. She's in the entertainment business and marketing. Rhonda, I forgot my girl's name, but Rhonda is also a person that does marketing. She works for the NHL, the NFL, excuse me, right now in Vegas. Gives the biggest events in Vegas right now. Eric Llewellyn, he went on to buy a car company with Corey Rooney, Power Memorial, or Power Motors, excuse me. They have a car company together. He sells the biggest Maybachs, this, that, and that. All right. Then there's Jeff Thomas that went to college with us. And then also Jeff, what's Jeff's name that had Alicia Keys and her? Jeff.
I can't think of Jeff's last name right now.
Right, but Jeff had Alicia Keys and her, but he was an intern of Kurt Woodley at Lehman College and mine, and he came to Uptown with us, and he wound up being bigger than everybody.
Right.
With Alicia Keys and her, him and Kurt. So I had a lot of people that worked under me that came in the game. I had another young guy. I started the Big Brother program and the intern program at least
Jeff Basker, I think. Is it Basker? Jeff Basker?
No, Jeff.
No, Jeff. No, it's not Jeff Basker. No.
Okay, no. That's fine.
But I had an intern that was 12 years old, making $60,000 a year, taking care of his family. Then when they went to Motown, he brought his brother, Javar, and he wanted to work there. Right. Jeff Robinson is who we're talking about. Yeah. But I had stuff like that. And I had 500 interns around the country that were working as grown men. And I started my street team in the Bronx with a guy by the name of Derek Osario. His name is Chuck Bone. And Chuck Bone helped me build my street team. So I had an independent company called The Gas Station. Chuck named it and everything. He went to Mount St. Michael's with Puff.
Yep.
All right. And he
and Andre.
Amazing personality, wound up being hired as an A&R at Motown through me bringing him to Uptown. So,
I mean, today is the final day of Black History Month, and I guess one of the fascinating things is that we've been able to hear, one of our most celebrated labels, Uptown, and how, definitely not just the pride of New York and Harlem, but really changed the game globally. you know, I guess people would want to know, just as we, you know, because we've kept you guys for a long time. And I can probably start. I know, Jimmy, you did the Defiant Ones, you did the Dear Mama documentary and stuff. People have been asking, what about the Uptown bio? So just, you know, looking forward, what could people expect to see from Jimmy?
So what with me right now, I'm doing a concert. It's celebrating Andre Harrell. I want to show you guys something at Lehman College where we went to, where we created Uptown Records. Kurt Woodley, Andre Harrell, Alonzo Brown, and myself. Last September, I was successful at getting Andre his honorary doctorate degree from Lehman College.
Wow.
And also, I'm in the process of getting a street named after him from the projects that Jodeci was living in. It's called Sonia Mayor, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Mayor. She lived in that same projects. Jeff Robinson also, who had Alicia Keys and her, or who has her now, I guess, but he lived in that projects and he went to Lehman College with us. So Andre comes out of that project. So we're naming a street after him. The projects is named after Sonia Mayor, and the street is going to be named after Andre Harrell. Then on across 110th Street, which is Andre Harrell's publishing company, we're naming that across 110th Street, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde Way, that part. So that's in Manhattan, who we represent Harlem, and he's going to get both of those things going on. Then we're having a concert at Carnegie Hall on November 13th, celebrating the whole Uptown staff, the Uptown artists. We're going to have Chris Rock hosted. Kenny Burns is going to be a host. DJ Cassidy is going to be one of the DJs. DJ and all. If we could get D Nice, we'd love him to be a part of it. Clark Kent could be a part of it. But Eddie F is going to have his own segment and major part of it. You know what I mean? With Heavy D representing Heavy D and the Boyz, and Eddie F and the Untouchables and all the music that he played. You know what I mean? Because Eddie got a legacy that it goes beyond Uptown. You know what I mean? And he got hit records that go beyond the records he made at Uptown. So, you know, we got to celebrate him as well as Heavy D, who helped open Heavy D and the Boyz, who helped open the door for us. So it's called the Uptown Forever Gala. And we're going to have, you know, like I said, Mary J. Blige. We're going to have Andre's family come and accept this award that I got and several other awards that I got from him. So this is a doctorate that I got today and for Andre Harrell, and I'm going to give at this event. Give it away. And we have the governor coming. We have the mayor coming. I'm going to just show y'all again so y'all can get a good look at it. You know, it's important that you understand the significance of what I'm doing for this man, because he deserves it. You know, because without him, and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to go as far as saying without him, without Russell Simmons and Leor Cohen and Rick Rubin, there would be no organized fashion of hip hop music. You know, we wouldn't be sitting here, you know, period. You know, and Andre learned from Russell. You know, we learned from Andre. And now you have Jay-Z and Rockefeller. Then you got Irv Gotti and his. If you listen to all of Irv Gotti's music, it's nothing but Uptown music.
Yeah,
it's nothing but remakes of Uptown music. So this is, you know, I'm in the process of shooting a one-day Dave Chappelle-like documentary during the concert, and it's going to be at Carnegie Hall. It's going to be in November the 13th. We're shooting the documentary. We're also doing with YouTube a streaming component where we're going to, you know, do a streaming component, and then we're shooting a documentary. And it's going to be shot by no other than Dr. Jekyll partner, Mr. Hyde, Alonzo Brown, who headed up our television division of Uptown. So all
the strictly business and all that stuff.
And even with House Party, they were the original writers of House Party. And in House Party, all of our groups are in it. the girls are named
Yeah.
Vanessa Sinquist. Groove Be Chill is in the movie. They were part of Uptown in the beginning. And then so we're gonna do like a 1-day shoot. We're gonna prep for 3 months and do this 1-day shoot at Carnegie Hall, and it's gonna be a huge thing. And then after that, I'm gonna let Eddie say what we're gonna carry it out on after that too, because we're gonna keep it going.
Yeah. So what about yourself, Eddie? I mean, as I say, you've people know that you went back into heavy production with the Untouchables, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about Pete Rock and CL Smooth, and then all the stuff you did with Intro and Donnell and stuff. But what can we expect from you going forward?
Well, yeah, and we'll do another segment and we'll deep dive into all the Untouchable stuff. But I'm actually working with a few creative and talented artists right now. I'm putting out singles on the platform Eddie F Presents.
Oh, you had one with Miss Jones. You had something with Miss
Yes,
Jones.
and that was with one of the first singles that we put out. And we actually did well with that song. We charted on Billboard, and actually the song is still is still playing now. And basically, I'm gonna be putting out new music. Right now, you have a lot of artists that are putting out music, but the problem is a lot of artists don't have support. They don't have people that can help them get their songs noticed, get it promoted, get help them with their just marketing and promotion and development and artist development. So that's one of the things that I'm doing with Eddie F Presents, which you see behind me. I'm also going to be putting out, these are new artists, and then I'm also going to be putting out some of the classic artists, some of the familiar names that we've done songs with in the past and had success. And then I have some other things I'm doing that are totally outside of music, but they relate to music. One's an education platform related to music that I'm working on. And I'm going to be doing that. And also I'm doing a DJ series, Eddie F Presents, where I'm going to be putting out, we're going to be doing like mini concerts, with artists, Uptown artists, Untouchables artists. It's going to kind of be a spinoff of what we're doing for, the big celebration. But there may be it may start after. There may be a show or one or two maybe before leading up to. We don't know yet. We're just working out those details. But you're gonna see a lot of interesting things happening this year.
I just want to if I could, shout some people out from Uptown, and people that helped me and helped everybody, Eddie and everybody, Puff Daddy, whether it's Mary J. Blige. These people really took care of us at Uptown, and I think it's important to, one, acknowledge some of the artists that was there, but also acknowledge some of the people that was there that helped, and I wanted to just shout out Lisa Cambridge, Lou Tucker, Dice, George Harrell, Jeff Thomas, Dick Gidron, who brought Nesto to the table. And, he's a famous, one of the first 5 families, Black families, to come to America and be very, very successful. So his family, if you ever Google him, you'll know about his family. Yolanda Douglas, and I know I'm forgetting a whole slew of people because we had about 60 people that even Laya LaFleur, who went on to produce, write, work with Dick Wolf on New York Undercover. She's also a writer, a very accomplished writer as well. That's my girl, Brett Wright, who did all the marketing. I brought him in. There's people that was there that helped. When I brought Kurt Burrows to the table, Andre, wound up picking Brett because Brett worked at the Source. Now the Source was started by David Mays. I used to go in Harvard. I used to go to Harvard and pay for David Mays' one sheet. The Source was a one sheet in Harvard. and he was at the school radio station, and then that's where the source came out of. And then the next thing you know, it was the Bible of hip hop, you know, and you know they went through their experiences. And I'm mentioning him because I want to shoot him a kite, saying, "Stop putting Suge Knight on Instagram, disrespecting my man.
Yeah.
Knock it off, David."
Yeah. Wait, everyone's asking about the any idea if the Uptown bio, because you guys have really dropped a lot of knowledge and wisdom here. Would you guys collaborate on doing an Uptown
I
bio?
definitely want to collaborate. Me and him, Eddie, is talking about collaborating on several things right now, and that'd be so. You know, it won't. The things that I do outside of this thing I'm doing at Carnegie Hall has to be more about the journey of hip hop and R&B and our journey in film, fashion, and television. It can't just be on Uptown. It has to be on the influences and where we were, where we are now, and where we're going. It can't just be on Uptown, you know what I mean? Because then it's so much politics surrounding that. You'll fuck around and never get a bio out or a doc out or whatever. You know, we gotta concentrate on where this music came from, how it came about, where we're at right now, what we're doing with it right now, and where we're going with it tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it's not just about talking about Heavy D, but it's talking about all the things that Eddie's done outside of Uptown and to move forward to create the career that he has now and going forward in the future. And the same thing with me. You know, I got into film and music so that I could, you know, go to another level instead of, you know, making records, because I didn't believe that I could be a part of making an impact with the records that I would want to hear and would want to make right now. You know, you know, maybe tomorrow I might feel differently, but today I want to do shit that makes an impact right now. I got to make a real heavy, because I'm close to, you know, I'm about 15 years away before the end of my career. So, you know, I gotta hit it hard. I gotta hit it hard. You know, and saying that too, I just want to let everybody know that I was nominated for 2 Emmys and 1 Grammy this year. I didn't win, but 4 years ago I was part of a documentary called The Defiant Ones, along with my man, Grand Mixer. Excuse me, he's gonna kill me by calling him Wizard. Grand Mixer, DST. We did edited a part of The Defiant Ones, and we gave them 2 new records, and we won a Grammy for it. And this is my homeboy who grew up in the same projects as me since we were 6 years old. And his name is Grand Mixer DST, who won the first Grammy in hip hop with Herbie Hancock. And so that I just want to, you know, give him a shout out and make sure that, you know, he knows I love him. And also Christopher Williams grew up in that same project. And also Raheem and from Grandmaster Flash. And I come from a whole melting pot of superstars. and you know, we're going to continue the legacy. And that's how I feel. And I'm sorry if I was too windy, but I had to get that out.
No. I mean, the final question I'll have for both of you, and this would be, and I'll probably start with Eddie, is if you had, what would be your 5 favorite records that came out on Uptown? So it could be from any artist that came out on Uptown. If you had to pick 5 of the ones that you said, man, these are, you know, when you look back at Uptown.
First of all, I always got to start with Guy. I always got to start with, because that was like ground zero, the center. So, Groove Me, I like, and then let's see. Now I got to move around. Let's see. Favorite record. See, I'm a DJ, so it's hard. It switches around. You know, I just love music. So but let me see. Definitely, I'm gonna say Mary, but I'm not gonna pick a song because there's too many songs. So I'm gonna just say
What would be the first? Would it be the first? Would it be her first album or third? Which would you have favorite album by Mary then?
favorite album, man.
Yeah. So yeah, because if you couldn't pick a song, you could pick at least one of her favorite
Well,
album.
I'm gonna say Mary, a song from Mary, a song from Al. Those two songs I said from Guy, and Heavy D and the Boys. The Old Way Lovers in the House. But
Okay.
then I gotta go Candy Rain, Soul for Real.
Okay.
I got there's too many Uptown songs, man. It's like Jeff Red, you called and told me. You know what I mean? It's like limit it to 5. I can't. I can maybe limit it to. I could limit it to 15. I don't know if I can limit it to 5. Jodeci, come and talk to me. Like how do you leave these songs? How do you leave these songs out? It's more than 5 artists, and I got at least one favorite song from each artist, but I have more than one favorite song from each artist. I got at least 2 favorite songs from each artist. So you have to ask me that question again. We got to count the artists, and then I'll give you the 2 artists, because it's hard.
When we do our interview,
I like by Guy. Overweight Lovers in the House by Heavy D. My Life by Mary J. Blige. Cry for You by Jodeci. And then I had to put Treat Them Like They Want to Be Treated by Father MC, and then Candy Rain. I had to go 2 over because, 1 over.
Wow.
Okay. I can't limit it to 5 either. You know, it's just too many. It's too many. I got at least 3 Mary songs right off the rip, and I got at least 3 Heavy D songs right off the rip. You know,
you got Is It Good to You? We got
and I'm bugging out, leaving out Al B. Shore and Christopher Williams. Christopher Williams and Al had one of the most dynamic albums ever.
You got Night and Day. You got Naturally Mine. Then you got you got Chris Williams. Every little thing you do remix. It's just too. You can't.
Okay, what about albums though? So we go for each of the groups though, because you got
album.
Okay, if you go for Mary,
I only got one. I only got one. I'm not getting into the rest of them. I'm gonna say Guy's first album. Period. To me, that's ground zero for Uptown. And then there's a lot of dope albums, but that's like the album that just. This is what Uptown Records is.
I like Al's first album, In Effect Mode. I like Heavy's second album, or was it Overweight Lovers in the House on. I like that album. I like Jodeci with Cry for You, and I got a bunch of Jodeci songs, but that particular album that had Cry for You on it. And
so Diary of a Madman over the Forever My Lady.
Yeah.
Forever My Lady.
Anyway, every time Jodeci made a record, it was a part of your soul. You know what I mean? It was a part of your soul. Like, but you saying if I had to pick an album,
if you had to pick the album,
and I'm just telling you, y'all can say whatever y'all want, and he can say whatever you want, but he said Cry for You, and as soon as I drop Forever My Lady, he gonna be like, wait,
no, but you
remix. I might have to pick that one.
Yeah, because for me, I would always say "Peaceful Journey" was one of my first CDs I bought, and I love the "You're on My Mind." I love the the one with Johnny Gill. What a future something. He was on about the future. I love. But I love "You're on My Mind." "Peaceful Journey." Because that was my track, but of the big time I loved the You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet. And I remember being in Nigeria and just hearing that
Right.
intro, and I was like, oh my goodness, TikTok. I just love the whole. I use it so often. I love the style, the whole.
Rolling.
You ain't
Sit
heard
back,
nothing yet.
relax. Listen to it flowing.
Yeah,
Recorded
yeah.
that album in my mother's basement on the Kai, and we took the songs and we just transferred, we recorded it and mixed it. That was it. We recorded that record in my mother's basement. A bunch of those songs. It was like,
wow.
Teddy did the same thing with Guy's album. He did Guy's first album mostly in his living room he had the with the board. He took the board to the studio, transferred it over, and mixed it.
But you know what? I like Al's production on his album, you know, in Effect Mode, and you know, especially that one. You know, it's just at another level, huh?
Killing Me Softly on the production.
It's almost impossible to be picking these records like that.
Hey, you start picking records, it's like crazy. How you gonna you okay, we left out all we say okay, Night and Day, and then you put on Naturally Mine and go, nah, wait a minute.
Yeah, but it just shows you the rich stuff that you guys came up with, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about what made Kyle West so different, because he as I said, Kyle West is almost like a Sunday school teacher when you know, very, but he talked about, man, how Eddie just you know he came from a classical background, and Eddie was like, no, simplify it and here's the beats, and you know he was so complimentary. He almost made it seem as if you guys taught him everything and he just showed up.
That real quick. Kyle West and Kyle's dad was a formal, classically trained jazz musician. So Kyle has so much musical ability. He came from where you do songs like, whereas modern R&B has, like, you know, it has a song. I mean, it has the hook, has a verse, and it has a bridge. They were doing songs that have like, there's like 10 changes in the song. Like, there is no hook. The song is kind of just vibing, and it gets to a, you know, like those Quincy Jones songs where it's like, it's just vibing, and it's like 20 minutes is the song, and it goes.
Jazz
Where Kyle comes from. So Kyle got all that music in him, and you can hear it when Kyle starts going down a melodic somewhere, and that's when you hear these rich melodies in the I'll Be Sure stuff, and the things they did together. And like, Kyle is just he's one of the people that's like, okay, you talk about a person that's overqualified. He's like super overqualified. He's like, yo, probably be like, okay, I'm gonna be writing out, like, you know, music for like an orchestra, but then he was just doing R&B over hip hop. You know what I mean? So he just much musical ability, and it showed in the music. That's why you have these unique melodies. When you listen to a song like Naturally Mine, that's a special song. That doesn't sound like anything. You know, it don't sound like anything. There's nothing else that sounds like these songs.
But you know, when you talk about like people that were classically trained and stuff, I work with a producer by the name of, his name is George Pearson, and you know, he's you know, a jazz musician, came to New York. I put him with several different people, like, you know, the track masters, Chad Elliott. He worked with, you know, probably, I don't know if he worked with Eddie. Did he work with you, Eddie, at all?
He worked with me once. He did work with me.
So he worked with a lot of different people, but what made him different is he didn't really do hip hop tracks at first. But what he did was he was able to read and write music and produce the music. That's the difference between them. So, you know, and he bought these records, a record like Stilo 702, to a whole nother level. He bought a lot of different records that, you know, we're going to get into when we interview with him. I want you to know there's a whole bunch of the 90s, especially with Trackmaster, and a couple of, like, you know, 702 was one of the pivotal moments for Missy that took her to another level. You know, it opened the door for her to go just to another level. Like, that was one of her real significant hit records that she was on vocally. He was part of doing a lot of the production on that.
Yeah. Just quickly, Eddie, how come Pete Rock and CL Smooth didn't sign to Uptown?
Uptown was a lot of times when I wanted to bring things to Uptown, things were moving slow. Um, it wasn't
Oh,
that we didn't want to sign with Uptown. A lot of times, and sometimes Andre just might not hear it. He might not have seen it because Andre was a very visual, artist centric person as far as the artist. I was more of music first, and then we're gonna figure out the presentation. He was more looking at
okay.
what's the haircut, what's the gym. So, and again, when you look at the model, Teddy Riley and Guy, you look at Harlem Fly, you look at and then Heavy, Heavy D and the Boys, which he wanted Heavy D and the Boys. He really wanted Heavy D and the Boys to be like Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew. That was his vision for Heavy D and the Boys. And so sometimes when it was just the music, he might not get it right away, but if the whole picture wasn't there with what the artist is gonna look like, and Jimmy knows this happened on a few artists that were missed that by Uptown that had big, huge hit records that he may have passed on for whatever reason, or just not may have not gotten excited about. Because Andre was a culture like soul man. Like he would like it might be a certain note that somebody sang live that reminded him. It might have reminded him of like Al Green, Lou Rawls.
like, like when I brought Anthony Hamilton to the table. At first, I had two artists. I had Dwight Thomas, who was part of Men at Large from Cleveland, and then I had Anthony Hamilton, who came to me from Marks Park and North Carolina. And when he first heard Dwight, he was like, "Yo, who's that big man right there with sounding like a big light skinned big finger man?" He was like the yeah, he's the one I want to sign. That little black nigga right there, I definitely don't want to sign him until he heard Anthony's voice. And we started calling him Lou Rawls. We started calling him Bill Withers, Bill, Lou Rawls. And Anthony's voice was so full and so big that he forgot about Dwight to a certain degree and put all his energy into Anthony.
And Andre, an animated character, he'd be like, where you get that grown man soul voice out of that little body?
Yeah, that's just what he would say. Yep.
Yeah. What happened to Fat Doug?
Fat Doug was incredible. Fat Doug was part of making a lot of records, doing stuff with Puff. I don't know if he did stuff with Eddie, but Fat Doug was at Uptown since the beginning, and he was incredible. But like Tone was Red Hot Lover Tone from the Trackmasters. He was at Uptown since the beginning, trying to get a deal. So there was a lot of people there. There was Crystal Johnson was an incredible singer.
Tone was Clark Kent's rapper. When I introduced Clark Kent and Tone to Andre, Tone was Clark Kent's rapper. That's how back that goes.
And he sounded like Slick Rick too at the time, almost. So you had Nesto, Key West, Andre Wilson, and what's the other the guy's son that used to be is a famous. He made "Say You Love Me." What's his son's name? Say You Love Me. That what's this guy's name? I can't think of him right now. DJ Rogers. DJ's son. His DJ Rogers' son used to be at Uptown. Andre Wilson, who's Charlie Wilson's son, was at Uptown. We had Fat Doug, we had Crystal Johnson, and then Horace Brown and Ronnie Henson, and then Anthony Hamilton. But the main superstar that was before Mary, with Teddy Riley, her name is Tammy Lucas. The superstar.
And you couldn't get
superstar. And they made this record, You Say You Love Me, or whatever, that was on the Guys album. You say you that Love Me record or whatever. It was incredible when she sang it, but she didn't make the album. But then also Terry Robinson is learning under her and Aaron, and because all these people are church people. We all are church people. We all coming from the church.
Did you know Charlie Chamberlain?
No.
From where?
Okay. No. Some people somebody had just put in the question if you knew Charlie Chamberlain.
I knew Omar.
And then
what was Teddy's other guy? Omar Chandler.
Okay. And I mean, you know, it's a pity that you guys aren't putting out a documentary like the Defiant Ones, because
we need to get it together. But it got to be like the Defiant Ones, you know. But it can't be specifically, about Uptown. It can't be. It has to be about the music that Uptown influenced and the people that Uptown influenced. Like I said, there would be no Rockefeller if there wasn't Uptown. There definitely wouldn't be no Bad Boy if it wasn't Uptown. And whatever. What's Irv Gotti's record company name? There would be, there would be none of that without Uptown, and there would be no Pharrell if there wasn't no Devontae. There'd be no Devontae if there wasn't no Eddie F and Al B. Shore and whoever else was around. There was a lot of producers around that brought this music. And Uptown, there's a lot of singers that never were able to put out, albums. Some singers did, like Terry Robinson and the Girls, Tara Jeter, and who else was in the Girls? Monica Payne. Yeah, Monica, And Al produced a lot of the records, and Eddie did too, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to have to do a part two. I mean, especially, loads of questions came in about not just the Untouchables. You know, you had intro, all the stuff you did with Donnell, all the other things that you did. You know, you teamed up with Darren Lighty and did some productions there. You know, I mean, if you think about someone like Dave Hall, produced for Madonna, we talked about the Secret Bedtime Stories album, one of my favorite Madonna albums. We think about he did stuff on Michael Jackson's History. I'm talking about Dave Hall. We did stuff with he's a quiet producer, but so there's a lot of stuff that you talk about him, and with Novell, with his type of keyboard stuff. So there's so much that we haven't been able to cover. So hence when we get your stuff, and even the music, they have the music and why you didn't do anything on Nothing But Love. There's still so much. I know we can't carry on this evening and stuff. So, but you can see how much stuff that's on the floor. We've been on this for 3 hours, and we haven't even touched the surface. So,
we're gonna use this as the template.
Yeah, because people love this stuff. People, it's like a museum to be able to remember the history. To be able to remember this stuff and celebrate. We celebrate Andre for what he's done, but a lot of backstories we don't get to do. A lot of pop and rock artists, they do their stuff and they share all this stuff, but with R&B, it's only slowly now that we're being able to get these stories and being able to celebrate and hear the history and hear the backstory and be able to appreciate the music, because we're probably not enjoying the music that's out now. So hence we like to go back and stuff. So yeah, it has been, it's been great. People have been putting in the comments and being able to join through and stuff. But yeah, to be able to get you guys, because the thing that you did for Eddie, to be able to give him that opportunity to set it up. Think about what he did with, say, Kenny Smooth and Changing Faces. Think about not just helping, signing intro, but then look at what intro did to help Mary on her debut album, and then think about Donnell, and then think about Donnell doing Get It Together for 702, and you start to see how the branch just keeps to grow and expand and stuff like that. So there's so much more that we need to to dig in and stuff. And Jimmy, I've had you. This is the third time or so that we've been on, and it never stops. You know, there's so much story. And I know, Eddie, there's still so much that we're going to try and get from you. So, yes. Are you still DJing? Have you dropped the DJ Eddie F? Is
DJ,
that
but I'm
sort
still
of...
DJing. I did drop.
Okay.
Still DJing.
You want to call yourself
Okay.
grown man
So-
Eddie F?
Yep.
Okay. So you're saying November, Jimmy? It's the celebration of
gala.
Andre. You've
The
got
gala
the
at Carnegie
doctorate,
Hall.
honorary doctorate.
It's going to be amazing.
Okay.
We're going to be streaming it on YouTube, and also we're going to be filming it for production that day. It's going to be a one-day shoot behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, interviewing people that worked at Uptown, the audience, the artists, and it's going to be an amazing event.
And then also, Dear Mama, it's on. I know in the UK it's on
Dear
Disney
Mama's going
Plus.
to FX
That's
Hulu
the
in America. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's the Jimmy was one of the producers on that. If you haven't watched the Fine Ones, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine,
Right.
it is such an amazing documentary. Check that out. So Jimmy's moving into the film side as well, and as I said, Eddie F did the production for Miss Jones, a sort of a upbeat track, and you're getting into Afro beats as well.
Yeah, I have an Afro label, Afro America, along with Sugar Dice. We have an Afro beat label together. He's been way ahead. He's been in Afro soca music, reggae. He's been there for 15 years. He's been telling people 15 years ago, before Afro beats even got big. So he's one of the first people I went to, you know, with Afro beats. So we have a label, Afro America, and we're going to be putting out some interesting stuff this year as well.
Wow. No, yeah. So I mean, I'm Nigerian, so that's my you know, it all came from Nigeria, Afro beats, and started to spread. So it's good to see you guys are visiting and stuff. But don't worry, guys. Jimmy's always a phone call away. I'm actually going to have an interview with Jimmy and George Pearson coming up. But we're going to get Eddie back separately to do his Untouchables and his production, because I know everyone's going to be asking 100 questions about how did you do this and this remix and that and stuff. So, you know, don't worry about this. But this was really the last day of Black History Month, and we really wanted to celebrate one of the most incredible labels that brought out hip hop and R&B and New Jack Swing to the world, and that was Uptown. So I definitely appreciate both Jimmy and Eddie for taking this time, you know, and for you guys tuning in live and stuff to really celebrate Uptown. I mean, it's such an amazing label. You know, God knows what would have happened if Andre was still around now. And I you know, he was just full of life, you know, during the lockdown, you know, passing away. But he created such an amazing legacy and stuff. And I think finally for me, one of the things that I think that Eddie shed light on was the fact that there's a lot of people who assumed that Puffy used to just get people to do the production and he just did nothing. But you really shed light the fact that actually when you were doing your stuff, he was watching and learning. Yep. And actually he knew, so he was a producer, and you know, he had a sound, and he didn't just steal stuff. He actually was a producer. So that is definitely something that people need to remember, that despite what's all happening around, if you think about what he did, took up, you know, for Uptown and for music and stuff, that we can't forget those types of things.
And you know, Puffy was a dancer before that, so he understood beats and timing and everything like that, and got it right away. He wasn't even a rapper, but he became a rapper. And he wasn't a producer, but he became a producer really quick. And then really started getting to the hits because he got the science from the people that came before him. Yeah. So you always got to remember where you come from, and that'll determine where you're going. And, you know, if you have the foundation, you know, you could survive this crazy ass industry that we in. You know what I mean? And really, if you have a formula, you can continue to make records. You don't have to get old and not know how to make records no more. You can get old and make the records that matter because you have an understanding on how to do it. You know, it's the one hit wonders that really don't know what they're doing, and then they just putting out these records and they're here today and going tomorrow. And also the difference between a lot of records that was made then back in the day and a lot of records that's made now. If you get a hit right now because you made a record off your iPhone, you might make 75 to 300 million off that one single. Like right now, Jill Scott could make a smash hit R&B record and can't get $250,000 for the album. It's a difference what's going on now because they're not making records the same way and it doesn't get calculated the same way.
Right.
And we laid down the foundation for a lot of these kids that are smart to understand what they need to do in terms of protecting themselves and how to get paid off of their music. And that's one of the things that I was telling Eddie about earlier that I'm going to be speaking about in terms of just educating people about publishing and you know, mechanical royalties, your producers agreements, the importance of having all that stuff taken care of before you go in the studio.
Yeah, well, just real quick, I want a big shout out to Glenn, or commonly known as G Wiz.
What's up, baby?
Yeah, he gives a lot of love to you guys, and I know he's out in Miami enjoying the sun and stuff. It's pity that, you know, without Heavy, you can't have a sort of Heavy D and the Boys reunion without Heavy, but yeah, it would be great if, you know, we get Eddie and G Wiz to reminisce on both he on the performances and stuff, and Eddie on the music, because as I said, you won't find anyone that didn't love Heavy D and the Boys, because you guys made fun music. You know, you weren't battle MCs. You weren't digging into anyone else. It almost felt like you loved everyone. And we all remember when you got the Soul Train Award, and it was like, yeah, we love you guys, so forget about the Grammys and all that stuff. And Heavy says, who needs a Grammy when you know you got soul? And you know, I think sometimes you don't realize how universally loved you guys were. I had every album you guys did, and you know, we definitely miss Heavy, but we definitely miss the kind of music and energy that you guys brought.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, definitely.
I appreciate you.
Yes. So as I said, I'm going to come back with Eddie and Jimmy later on. You know, we didn't even get to talk about Eddie's top 5 Heavy D and the Boys tracks. So, you know, we didn't dissect the album, so we're going to do that separately. I'm not going to rush anything this evening.
Heavy D and the Boys records is nothing but love, though. You come with that first. You know what I'm saying? Because of the video too. Shout out to my man Brett Ratner who did it. Who did, you know, the Jackie Chan movie.
Nothing but love.
Yeah.
And shout out to Kid Capri who produced that song. A lot of people don't even know Kid Capri as
word. I didn't know that. I thought you produced it.
Nah, Kid Capri. I always shout him out on this song because nobody understands how dope of a producer. Everybody knows Kid Capri the DJ. They don't know how dope he is.
Yeah.
You go to Kid Capri's house, he start playing you beats. You like, yo, you a real, like, you really for real. He's like Kid Capri. It's one of those situations where him being such a dope DJ and being such a vocal DJ, it overshadows his production because his production is incredible. He has beats.
Wow.
And this was like 10, 20 years ago, I went to his house and he had beats for days. So he probably got, I'm not even exaggerating, he probably got 500 dope tracks. Just.
Wow.
So I want to shout out Wendy and Gianni Harrell. Wendy's Andre's wife. Gianni is his son. and they're very, very close. And at this event, we're going to be awarding them with all the citations and letting them know about the street naming, the street signs naming after Andre Harrell and Alonzo, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde on across 110th Street, which was Andre's publishing. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And we're presenting all that with the governor and the mayor at Carnegie Hall, November 13th.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Jimmy, I'll definitely bring you back before that so people can be ready for that.
Right.
And as I said, we'll get Eddie as well soon to go through the stuff. But yeah, it's been 3 hours and 15 minutes.
And I'm sorry for whoever I didn't shout out, though. Please, I know there's too many people to even remember at this age. But I tried to write it down, but I couldn't even remember then. So, and also my man Luther Clark, who also was a part of my promotional team, Eric Flewellen, George Harrell, Jeff Thomas, Tonya Salvant, Rhonda Nolan. So, as much as I can, Yolanda Douglas,
Mark Barnes,
Mark Barnes, the official Mark Barnes,
Lou
Tucker. And many, many more. Like I said, I had my own. It was two sides to the story. It was the A&R crew on this side, and it was the promotion and marketing crew on this side. Brett Wright as well, who did all the Uptown jackets. After changed the logo up a little bit to his style and his flavor from Montclair, New Jersey. You know what I mean? Gave us the Jersey flavor, and that was one of the part of the good things about Uptown too. We had people from everywhere. We had people from Howard University, from all kinds of backgrounds, from the ghetto to the heights of Westchester, to the bottom part of Mount Vernon, to the Northeast Bronx, the great Northeast Bronx, where all the flavor comes from, because I'm from that motherfucker. So we all good.
Yeah, you know what? Because I guess real quickly, why didn't Heavy sign Intro, Eddie? Because he heard them first, but he gave them to you, and that he
wasn't even producing then, really.
Right.
He wasn't producing. He wasn't signing artists. He wasn't even in that mindset. So when he saw them sing, Untouchables was going in '89. Heavy didn't really start producing like that and signing groups until after like Mary and Jodeci. This was in the mid '90s.
Yeah, so it's like So For Real and Monifa.
That was after. So this is like
those are Heavy's groups.
Yeah. 80.
Heavy brought him to Uptown, and then when Heavy took over Uptown, he brought So For Real with him.
Right.
But I don't think they had the same success that they had under us, because we had a regimented script, and they had to follow it, and they were young. They were incredible. That record took off faster than almost any record we had, but they weren't able to sustain, the type of promotion you had to do or to get your record over that platinum plus hump. You know what I mean? They could have had an album that would have sold 5 million the first album around, because it did sell 1 or 2 million the first time out.
Yeah, but how disappointing was it when Uptown folded? How did you guys feel?
Everybody was crying. Everybody was disappointed. But then, towards the end, even when Puff left, we still had hit records. We had So For Real and Horace Brown, but we also had a group called the Lost Boys. Who were, doubted at first, and they wind up shining through. And their records have longevity. And Mr. Cheeks and his crew, they, shout out to them. Incredible.
Anyway, as I said, I could keep going on and keep going on, but we're going to get, as I said, Jimmy, I'm with you. I think in a week or two. But Eddie, I need to schedule yours to go through your catalog and your backstory, and your production stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So Yeah, but anyway, appreciate it, guys. I want to thank you for tuning in. It is 1:45 in the morning over here in the UK, but hey, that's cool. It is it's almost 2 a.m., but hey, not a problem. But this has been golden, and it's Black History, and it's been exciting. But you guys, we'll get you guys back, and yeah. You guys do not have. Somebody said we need some of those leather Uptown jackets, but I don't think you guys have the rights to the logo anymore. So
we're making them anyway.
I was about to say, true
Yeah.
Uptown fashion, those jackets are getting made anyway.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, we may get Eddie F presents and Jimmy's bobbing stuff. But anyway, I can keep
All right.
going on. So thank you guys for tuning in and stuff. And don't worry, you'll catch Eddie later on and Jimmy later on as well.
Yes, sir.
All right.